our final 6-month update.
Hello, thank you, and thank you for attending our final ESSER 3 hearing. Just a little bit about ESSER. ESSER 3 is the final round of ESSER funds. It is part of a $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Our JPS allocation was $22.2 million. We have already finished up with ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, so this is our final round of ESSER funds, and we plan to be finished with spending by the end of this month. Just a side note, one of the requirements of ESSER 3 is that 20% of funds be used for addressing learning loss. And also ESSER 3 did also have a 2-year expenditure period. This is a list of allowable uses of ESSER 3 funds. The areas that we focused on were increasing mental health supports, adding instructional support for intervention and special ed, addressing learning loss, and continuing to employ and/or hire new staff. This is just an update of the funding timeline. We started this back in November of 2021, and we hope to be fully expensed by the end of this month. And just a final update, we subsidized 130 staff through this grant to build the fund balance. We purchased curriculum and educational software updates at every level in building. We provided professional development for staff to address learning loss. We created sensory rooms that helped with direct intervention to help address learning loss, attendance, and behavior issues. And also, just a final note, using these ESSER dollars for staff allowed us to make further investments in the facilities, for example, like interior paint refreshes at Parkside, Jackson High, and Sharp Park.
And really, that's about it. We just wanted to put a wrap on all of the COVID funding we've received over the last few years. So at this time, if there's anybody that has any comments or would like to speak, I'll open it up to that. And hearing none, we will close the ESSER 3 hearing.
So when we're ready, I do have one question for Marcus. We good? So I just wanted to make sure the audience knew that that was an opportunity for them to ask questions if you all had any on the budget. I don't know if you all were aware of that, if you thought it was just us, but you all can comment on the budget if you want to. Thank you. On ESSER.
All right, so we'll move on to the next hearing, which will be our state mandated by law hearing for the 24-25 proposed budget for the district for next year. So we'll just go over a few things real quick. A summary of our property tax millage rates. You'll see our operating mills at 18 mills, which again is levied on industrial and commercial property and people that own second homes. And if you're just a one home owner, it doesn't apply. The recreation millage for the Parks and Rec Department, and then our debt millage, which if you remember from last month, we lowered from 6.2 to 5.95 mills for this summer. So everyone is getting a tax break this summer on that. So that's just a little summary of what the district expects to collect for each of their different millages. Some of the assumptions that we used in creating the budget on the revenue side is we've planned pupil count flat. As you know, we won't have our pupil count until later in the fall, after count day in October, and we certify that. So we are right now planning flat for a foundation allowance from the state. Again, we don't have a state budget as of yet, so we used the $217 figure, which I think is the lowest number given out of the three proposals. Right now, they're in conference trying to reconcile their bills, so we'll have a state budget. Again, the retirement percentage without a state budget, we're just going with what we have right now, so we're leaving that flat as well, that 48.23% number. And then just one note for the revenue assumptions, as we mentioned with the ESSER funding winding down, our federal revenue levels will go back to pre-COVID levels of about $4 million as opposed to the $15 million we've been accustomed to the last couple of years. So that's one big change to note on the revenue side. Next slide is just a quick history on the foundation allowance for JPS over the last 10 years. Just, we kind of track this so you can kind of see where the state's landed with foundation increases, and you can draw conclusions from that. We try to do that as we make our budgets up. And then the next one, just a brief history on student count. So you'll see that decline all the way through COVID, and then in 22, 23, we had a big jump in enrollment. A lot of that was due to our shared time program with the parochial schools, and we've been able to level out and have a little bit more consistency in enrollment numbers. So that's kind of why we've planned flat this year. Some expenditure assumptions that we used in creating our budget is the hard cap for health insurance, or the amount that the district is allowed to pay for employee health insurance, is only going up by a little bit, 0.2%, so we'll call that flat. We are predicting, or we use an assumption of ancillary benefits such as dental and vision, which the district picks up 100% of those costs, to increase by approximately 8%. Again, we won't have our renewals for another month or two, so we only have information through the next few months right now. And then again, that flat retirement rate until we have a state budget, we can't change that. And then normal staff additions and adjustments as needed. So just a summary of our general fund. We are projecting general fund revenues next year at just under $72 million, and general fund expenses at just over $77 million. So as you heard, we were able to build up our fund balance through the ESSER funding the last few years. I know we've talked about it, that once the ESSER funding was over, we would start to dip into that fund balance. So as a first look, we're projecting as of today to dip into the fund balance of approximately $4 million. We hope through some more work this year to be able to bring that number down into the $3 to $3.5 million range by the end of next year. So right now, this is what we're able to bring today with not having a state budget, not having enrollment counts, and there's just a lot of unknowns especially on the revenue side of the equation. So this is at best a worst case scenario is what we're looking at right as of today, which would still leave us with over 17.5% fund balance per our board policy, which we target a 15% amount. So right now we're looking pretty good so far with that. And then one more chart just to show you the fund balance over the years, and you can see how we were able to grow it through those COVID dollars. And now we're going to start to bring it back in line with where we'd like it to be. That 15% is a nice target rate, which allows the district not to have to borrow for general operations and things like that. And then the budget, the district is made up of four other main funds: the food service, which is a self-sustaining fund, the school activity funds, which is all of the student fundraising accounts at all of the different buildings, the debt service fund, which is all the debt tax collections that we take in to make our debt payments for all the bond millage issues over the years that we have outstanding still. And then we have combined capital projects funds, which has things like our electric bus project, whatever's left in the 2018 bond. And then if you remember last year, the board authorized us, or we started putting away a little bit when we can for emergency operations if a boiler goes down in the winter or whatever. So that's all wrapped up into the capital projects fund. And I'm going to go over, that's it for the PowerPoint. Now I'm going to go over a little bit more in detail on the numbers. So if you have your packets, I know it might be a little bit hard to see on the screen, but this first tab just shows all of the different funds, the general operations, the special revenue funds, the food service, student activity, things like that. So it'll give you a brief overview of the different categories where that money comes from, like property taxes, building rentals on the general fund side. And then the expenditure side, things are broken down by instruction, instructional support, all the different categories and departments that make up the district. And again, you'll see on the bottom that $14 million projected fund balance at the end of next year that we just showed in the PowerPoint previously. And we'll just carry that across. So each fund has their own fund balance. The next tab will give you a quick overview of where our money comes from. And as you can see, the bulk of our money does come from that state aid. And things you can see that that grant line specifically, that went from $14.5 million down to $4.5 million for next year, just like, we were kind of talking about with the ESSER funds going away. The next slide will be a representation of how we're spending our money with another wonderful graph. So as you can see, instruction and instructional support make up over 72% of our budget. So you can really see that the vast majority of our dollars go directly into the classroom. And you can see all the other departments, transportation, business, outside of grounds and maintenance, just because of the size of the district, it's all very small in relation to the entire pie, if you will. The next slide just breaks those expenditures down a different way. So you can see that, salaries and benefits, again, will make up about 73% of our budget. With contracted services, the next big one at 20%. And some of those dollars are going into the classroom. Those would be like some of our retired teachers that are paid through EduStaff. That's considered a purchase service. So that would also be direct classroom expenditures. So again, 70 to 75% of our budget is directly into the classroom. The next page just gives an even more detailed breakdown by function of the district, whether it's an elementary expense, middle school, high school, all the way down, the salaries, benefits, and all of the different buckets. And you get down to the bottom and you'll see the same numbers that we were showing on the other slides and graphs. And we'll have a summary for each of the special revenue funds. So the food service fund is right here, this first one. And as you can see, we are still to the good and have a healthy fund balance. And that, again, is a self-sustaining fund through meal claims and a la carte purchases and things like that. Same thing with the student activity or those fundraising accounts. So we try to make sure that the fundraisers that happen we raise money for a specific function and we spend it on that and, that alone. So it's its own fund. So it's not, those monies aren't mingled with the general fund at all. Same thing with the debt service fund. So this is just recording the property taxes that we're projecting that we'll take in, and then our expenditures are fixed. So we have a debt schedule that'll tell us this is what we're paying in November, this is what we're paying in May, those are those interest and principal payments. And again, same thing with the capital projects, and we just combine all of our capital projects into one fund. And that is it for my presentation. So again, I'll open it up for the audience or the board if there's comments or questions on any of this.
Marcus, if you don't mind, I just will share just a couple things real quick because there are two bills out there, and I know there's been a lot of advocacy work both at the board level and in the community. There are House Bill 5803 and Senate Bill 911. These have to do with buying down the MIPSERS rate, which has to do with the OPEB, the unfunded portion of health insurance in retirement, which has now been fully funded. That would buy down the district's responsibility to MIPSERS by 7%, which would be about $2 million dollars to JPS. So it's not small money. So as we watch that flow through, that would obviously have a significant impact as far as our expenditure side. So kind of help bring that back into budget.
Yep, so we'll be watching those closely, and if they do pass, obviously we'll be able to capture those changes that are First Amendment in the fall and dip into the fund balance a little less.
And just for everybody here, you know, our plan was always, you know, as we kind of put money away, we knew, you know, we were going to come to a point where we were going to have to spend, and the board's going to have a responsibility of how quickly to spend those dollars down. You know, my recommendation is no more than about 3 years till we get to a balanced budget. But again, as we kind of move through this, and the board will have to make a decision to say, Jeff, we want the district to be more aggressive in balancing the budget or less aggressive, or set those guide rails for us, and then we can certainly act within those parameters. Marcus and I are pretty confident, you know, we'll be able to kind of whittle that 4.1 million down to under 3.5 is really the margin that I've set for him right now. But obviously, if the OPEB or if the budget comes in better, we haven't seen a state number. So if our enrollment is up or if our per pupil allowance is higher, those will obviously impact us. If enrollment comes in higher, that'll impact us. So there's a lot of variables out there that we still have some availability to. And Marcos was pretty conservative with regards to the categoricals. So state aid comes in a couple of different forms. It comes in the form of the foundation allowance, and then there are also these categoricals such as at-risk that funnel in, and we're still kind of, is this money going to be there this year? We don't know until we get a state budget what those dollars are truly going to look like. So that, again, for everybody, just kind of some additional information. But as we set our stuff, we try to be as conservative as possible on the front end because I'd much rather come back with good news than have to come back in the middle of the year and try to make cuts or make changes in January when half of the year's expenses are already expended. So an example is if you got to cut $100,000 in January, you really have to cut $200,000 worth of expense because $100,000 of it's already been expensed out. So the cuts get deeper the further into the year we go. So Marcus, again, back to the audience, and I apologize, I don't mean to interpose here, but this is, if the audience has questions, I'll make certain they've got some of that information. It's public comment, so absolutely. Not for this part. This is just a hearing, so.
I'm John King. I live at 203rd Street here in the city, a couple blocks away. And I guess the question that I would have, and I'm glad to see it doesn't appear things are nearly as bad as Ann Arbor, where they were tens of millions of dollars off in their budget and had to do a lot of cuts. So I guess my question would be is if Marcus or Jeff could compare, you know, if they've looked at Ann Arbor and why is Jackson in so much better shape than Ann Arbor, or what do you do? I mean, it seems you've been responsible with putting the budget and looking ahead. What went on with Ann Arbor? Do you have any comments of what went on with Ann Arbor that you would have advised them, oh, you shouldn't do things that way? So that's my question. Thank you.
So I'm hesitant to speak to another district. I will tell you, kind of watching what's happened, and I know their superintendent, and they ran into a kind of a grinding wheel. So they lost about 1,200 students at the same time that they lost a bunch of ESSER revenue. Those two things combined certainly had a significant impact. I don't want to speak to kind of where they should or shouldn't spend the money. We have known from the beginning that the cliff was going to come. I mean, as Marcus said, we we subsidized, we spent a lot of dollars subsidizing costs for employees, knowing that those dollars were going to come back. But what we did was we took that money that we were subsidizing and we put it in the bank account. And so with the intention, again, with the idea that we knew we were going to be able to provide those supports today and be able to extend those supports as long as our fund balance will allow. When the fund balance gets to a margin, we're going to call it 15%. It could be a little bit higher depending on where the board goes. We're going to have to be back to balance. And some of that we would like to do over a period of years through attrition. It's simply a much cleaner way to be able to reduce our fund balance and at the same time not go broke doing it. So we'll take a look at how we manage that budget through attrition rather than mass layoffs. But again, I don't want to speak to another district. I can speak to us, and I think this has been, since this started, since we saw ESSER 1 come out, those immediate COVID dollars, we really kind of developed this plan years in the making, and it's been, we've stuck pretty close to that line for a long time.
So had kind of a Q&A for Mr. Leon. The first being, so it states in here that the JPS share of ESSER 2 funds is 22 million, correct?
ESSER 3, yes.
ESSER 3, excuse me.
Yep.
We're already
Sorry,
on the
no,
way to
you're
3.
fine.
They grow up so fast. So combining ESSER 1 through ESSER 3 funds, what has been the total allocation or award to JPS?
A little north
roughly?
of roughly 31 million, call it ish.
Okay. And so my question being is, when I look at the allowable use of the ESSER 3 funds, it says those monies can be used for improving indoor air quality. Could this have been applied for HVAC work?
Potentially, yes, but realistically, it probably wouldn't have been able to get done in the expenditure timeline of the grant, and probably was not enough to do the entire district.
But
that
you
make
could have
sense?
tapped into it for that purpose, even if to partially pay for it.
We could have looked at it, the HVAC and indoor air quality, things like that, those capital projects, there's a lot, when you're talking about federal dollars being used for those kind of projects, there's a lot more stringent guidelines that you have to follow in terms of prevailing wages for labor and things like that. And
No, I think the answer is yes. You could have spent it on HVAC, but kind of put this in perspective. If you just, first of all, you can't spend all of it. You have to spend. We had to put 20% of it away for learning loss. We spent quite a bit on mental health services, but even if you spent all of ESSER 3, the $22 million, that would not have created HVAC for this building. That wouldn't have put air conditioning in Jackson High, just to kind of put it in perspective. I mean, it could have done an elementary or two, but it certainly would not. That amount, if I'd have spent every penny, wouldn't have covered air conditioning for Jackson High.
Well, and that sort of leads to the point, though, that it could have been used incrementally towards that goal. Because if you look at the ESSER funds, it has been an immense windfall of funding for the district. And this is coming upon your 2017 building bond, which was $84.5 million, something like that.
87.5.
Okay, I was $3 million short.
I got you. Again,
You'll see my 84 and raise me 3.
Right there. Well, and then we gained some interest. So we were up to 92, I think, all in.
Okay. So it just seems odd that you've had these two immense inflows of funds, one which was planned and campaigned for with the public, one which was unplanned, but by the time ESSER 1 came along, you knew there'd be ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, yet you're also in a position now where you're going to be seeking another bond offering next year to pay for HVAC. So I think it's a very legitimate question is, why wasn't significant funds from the 2017 bond and then from ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3 applied, even if it couldn't have paid for that in toto, But to have at least, like I said, you have buildings all over the place, start building towards that goal.
I think the answer is it's still there. The money's still sitting in the bank account. I mean, in the form of our fund balance. And we use an operational fund balance for the health of the district. I mean, at the end of the day, we were borrowing. If you go back a number of years, we would borrow $5-6 million every year. We had to pay interest on top of that. That cost the district money, that put us in harm's way. We worked very hard to move ourselves out of that. And so it did put us in a financially healthy position. We are going to look at a bond coming up. We'll talk about some of the details with it. This is going to be a very community-driven project, just like the last one. But I think as I've shared, I think there's going to be an opportunity, much like we just reduced taxes in June, for us to reduce taxes again next year and
Mr. Beal,
reduce the millage rate again. But we'll get there when we get there.
my understanding is we used it to keep teachers in classrooms.
We put more teachers in classrooms, without a doubt. We hired in advance, knowing what.
With which funds? We're kind of jumping around from fund to fund.
ESSER, well, all of our ESSER, we funded, how many people? 100 and,
Well, through ESSER, in the latest round, ESSER 3, we were able to fund approximately, that 130 number or whatever. Now, remember, ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, those came out, a year? There was probably about a year, 18 months in between each round, and you never really knew that there was another round coming until it happened, right? And the first two rounds had, while some of the allowable expenses were the same, I think the first round, they were a little different, and there was a component to the first round where we had to share with our parochial partners as well. That was, I think for JPS, was like a $2.5 million round, and I don't remember how much went to the parochial partners, right? So,
Marcus, can we use the bond proceeds to pay teachers?
no.
Yeah, I
There's
knew
your
that.
answer.
Yeah, the bond proceeds, however, could have been used for HVAC. So the question is going to be posed and is going to have to answered come 2025, why JPS failed to address this need along the way. Since 2017 was supposed to be sort of a revisionary or a visionary rethink of the school. So it seems like a reach to me.
well, and everybody's going to have, I mean, much like the last bond, there's going to be folks who say, I like this portion of the bond, or I don't like that portion of the bond. I will tell you, when you go back to the 2018 project, and I kind of shared this out, last month, in 2018, the voters trusted us overwhelmingly to do these projects. And we have to, when we expend bond dollars out, we have to expense those with exactly what's in that bond application up to the state. We can't divert that in a different direction. And we certainly can't do it on.
And I guess too, if you remember, in the 2018 bond, some of those projects like the new Cascades building, John R. Lewis, and Montessori, air conditioning was added to those projects.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess
But
we,
get to the end though, today, and again, I said this the other day, I don't know that everybody understands this. When you start back in 2018, you say, okay, you got $87 million and we're going to invest a chunk of it. We don't know what we're going to quite get. We made good interest on it. We made 92. But you go back and you do the different projects over the years and the different bid cycles. So you give an allowance to any given building. And when you get to the end of the project, and right now we're going to finish the bond about $500,000 under budget. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got $500,000 that we can then go spend on something. We have to spend it on what was approved within the bond. And so there are pieces that were put on there as options that we didn't take at the time that we can then go back and apply. And some of that will be technology, and some of that will be some of those other pieces.
Yeah.
But we cleared out of, between 2018 and now, $92 million worth of construction with more contractors than I could potentially count, and essentially threw a dart back in 2018 and hit a bullseye today. And that's hard to do. There are more districts out there today that are saying, we can't finish our construction project because the bids have come in too high and we need to go back out and ask the voters for more money, and that's not what's happened within JPS. We've been pretty good stewards of the people's money, and we'd like to say, or be able to show that we've delivered exactly what we promised from 2018.
Okay, well, just to wrap it up, I'd say yes, point taken. You have to spend the bond proceeds per the proposal for the bond, but the HVAC could have been written into that, but it was not considered a priority at the time.
Put that together No, that parent group, we had about 90 folks sitting in this room that help us to organize. There's always more projects than we have money for. So at the time, I think we identified $150 million worth of need, and we couldn't obviously do that. So we did what we could bite off, and they picked and chose what they were gonna prioritize.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? And then I think Ms. Hamilton, you had a question or two.
Yep. So I did have a couple questions. So I don't know if it's helpful, and I think we might have did a good job of explaining kind of what the money was used for and, what it was allowed to be used for, those ESSER funds. I don't know if there's more information. I know we spent it on curriculum. I think we spent some ESSER funds on curriculum and different things like that.
Yes, we updated curriculum at every level, gen ed, special ed, almost all subjects.
Yeah, okay. So some of the other questions that I have, I recognize that it says in the information that these presentations that we hired an additional 130 folks. Nope, it doesn't say that. Okay, what does it say?
We used it to subsidize approximately 130 of our staff, not additional folks.
Okay, good to know. So we're subsidizing, or we did subsidize about 130,000. I'm sorry, 130 people, folks. And so I'm just so you know, I'm trying to understand this stuff, okay? So I might say it wrong, but hopefully because you're an expert in this, you'll understand what I'm saying, you'll get to it, you know what I mean? All right, so I understand that our fund balance, the state doesn't want us to go below 17%, 15%. Thanks.
So that 50%, that's from one of our board policies that the board set years ago. That's a target number. That's a guideline or a goal that you'd like to reach. And that number comes from that's a good number where you don't have to borrow.
Okay. I thought it did.
Of 5%.
If you get below
Okay.
5%, that
Then
triggers
know.
in.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, because I was wondering, I thought it was the state at 15%, but it's good to know we set that. Okay. So we're at 17%. So, okay, so that kind of, and still with answering that question, we'll be at around 17% when we're done in another year?
So my projection for the end of next June is we'll be around 17.5%. Now that percentage is based off of prior year's expenditures.
Okay.
So if we're going from $80 million to $60 million, let's just say, that percentage is going to change a lot because it's tied to another number.
Like the
Like
allowances and stuff like that? Is that what it's tied to, or?
It's tied to the expenditure number. So if we're reducing $10 million of expenditures, that number, that percentage could go up even though we're dipping in the fund balance,
Okay.
just because the sample size is smaller,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
I think it does make sense. Okay, so the question maybe then, how are we sustaining? So I get it that, and I could be, correct me if I'm wrong again, we're at 14 mil or something like that, going down to 4 million. Is that what you said? We're at 14 mil going.
We're projecting to be around a little over 18 million in fund balance at the end of this year. We're projecting to use about $4 million during the 24-25 year, which would leave us today with about a little over $14 million in fund balance.
Okay. And
For this year, and that number would change next year based on this year's expenditure levels.
the graph that I'm looking at is our fund balance graph, this one. And I'm seeing that we just spent a lot, right? Is that what that blue line that's coming down means, that we've spent a nice chunk?
So that's that projection from this year, from the end of this month to the end of next June. That's if everything holds true.
We'll spend that
That's where
month.
that blue line will go down.
Okay, and each year, will the blue line continue to go down?
Hopefully not. That'll be at the board's discretion, and it'll also depend. It could go up and down a little bit depending, again, on the level of expenditure for the district, right? So, if we have $20 million of fund balance and $60 million of expenditures, that's going to be a higher percentage. If we had $20 million on $80 million of expenditures, it'd be a smaller fund balance percentage, same dollar amount.
Okay,
Miss,
that's making sense. I think
So
and you're probably going to
I try
answer.
not to
Ask the
focus
question.
on where the graph goes.
Yeah.
I think if we're staying close, true to that 15% goal, that's really
And is
what we
that
should be aiming for.
That's the
And
orange line,
that's a moving target every year.
and that's the orange line that we're looking at.
Correct.
Jeffrey, you want to say something?
I was only going to say, you spoke to sustaining, and I will
Yes,
tell
yep,
you,
that's what I'm trying to get to.
I thought we were even, so the reality is that we will have to make cuts,
That's what I was wondering.
but our goal is to cut through attrition.
So people
not
retiring and
As
you know,
people
stuff like
retire
that.
or leave out, rather than to institute or implement a layoff. Now, there will be times when some of our positions, you know, we will hire. We're going to talk about an MTSS coordinator. That's a grant-funded position, so we know we got the grant for 2 years. Well, you know what happens in 2 years when the grant runs out? Either we got to
Right.
find another grant or the position goes away. And it's the same conversation. So as folks leave out, as folks retire, that's really how we intend to balance the budget. And that's why I say we really need to, if we get to, we're at 4.1 today, and I don't think we'll end there, but let's just use that for argument's sake. If we're at 4.1 this year, we really need to be about 2 next year and really about 1 the following year.
In order not to go below that 15%?
And in order to be able to do this without layoffs, if
That's
you
what I was
will.
wondering.
That's our goal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, if the board says, Jeff, you got to get more aggressive, obviously that
Then
would
we'd
mean
have to
some
lay off.
layoffs, and there's a procedure for that. But our goal right now is really only to eliminate positions
Through
as
attrition.
those grant funds run out for specific pieces or as attrition. So if I don't need as many art teachers, or if I don't need as many second grade teachers, whatever it happens to be, we'll right-size the district that way, which is a process we've done for years. This time, we simply happen to be in a healthier position to do that, so we can do it over time rather than having to do it all in one lump sum.
That makes sense.
I hope that answered your sustainability question.
Yeah,
We
that-
can't sustain the spending at $77 million
Right.
if we're not.
Bringing in that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Because I'm wondering about those 130 positions that we're supplementing. How many of those potentially might we be looking at, you know, no longer being able to supplement, which looks like, you know, so realistically through attrition, which is, if the
Through
audience doesn't know,
attrition,
give me a
so-
minute. If the audience doesn't know, because I learned this word, Marcus, so I want to tell them, you know what I'm saying? Attrition is where, you know, people are retiring and stuff, you know what I mean?
Think
We're
of
not
it-
firing them.
think of
So
it this
through
way.
attrition, realistically, about how many positions should we be worried about? Or is that something that we're really not? I'm just wondering, you know, in 4 years,
It's
3
just part
years.
of our staff,
you know.
our planning process every year. You know, we look at it, you know, projected enrollment step-ups and
There's a couple pieces out there. I'll tell you, an area that we're watching right now that we do not know where the budget's at, does come in some of our support personnel because they're funded through 31A, through at-risk grants. We don't know what that number is until we get the state. Now, we're assuming we're going to get pretty close to what we got last year, but I don't want to, you know, again, hold your breath, right? So the answer to your question might be, you know, we might go through attrition. It might be 10 people, 10 staff members in any given year. It might be 15 or 20 if we get more aggressive. And it'll be a combination. It won't just be secretaries. It won't just be parapros. It might be teachers. It might be administrators. It might be across the board, depending on where enrollment is, where our need is. So if I've got a high need in a specific area and they get enough federal funds because federal title dollars are allocated by building, we can use those grant dollars to help sustain some of this. I wish I had that answer to be able to say, well, it's going to be this number. What I can tell you is where we're looking at right now, Marcus and I, like I said, we believe we could take that 4.1 and reasonably get it under 3.5. Now,
And we can
Marcus
sustain
can't-
that 3.5, sounds like.
What's that?
We can sustain that 3.5 with what we're bringing in?
No.
Uh-oh.
That's
that's
still
the
a
dip
dip.
in fund balance
okay.
is what we're talking about.
We,
So
but we believe we can reduce our expenses this year by $700,000-800,000 or a little bit more. And there's still the potential to have a better than, Marcus chose the minimum foundation allowance. So if we get a little bit better than that, that'll be in a little bit less, right? It really just rolls into how many students, how much are we getting per pupil, and how many students do we have? That'll dictate some of that sustainability moving forward. But
That makes sense.
there's just more to it. It's really complicated in that regard. But the short version of the story is no, we can't sustain everybody. Yes, we're probably going to lose 10 to 15 people in any given year, and that will, if we do that over 3 years, that will get us to a balanced budget.
That makes sense. Thank you. One last question. What's our layoff policy? Was it like last hired, first fired? That was something, way back in the day. Is that, how do we do that?
So it's all done by evaluation. And
Okay.
there's a whole, the last time we did layoffs was COVID time when
Mm-hmm.
we were going, okay, the sky's falling. We don't know what we're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
And we use a straight, there's a point system based on your evaluation, based on your attendance and discipline, based on certification. So sometimes you might go, it's not last in, first out anymore.
Okay.
That ended years and years ago.
Good deal.
So
Okay.
It's going to be based on a whole series of events, but evaluation or effectiveness is a significant portion of it. Like I said, discipline, attendance, do you come to work?
Mhm.
Do you do your job kind of thing? Do you have a special certification that we need? In other words, if you're a CI teacher,
Right.
it's hard for me to lay you off because I'm going to have to go hire another CI teacher.
Right.
So that didn't do me any good.
Right.
So some of those pieces come into play in regard to that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, I will close the hearing and turn back over to you, Pam.
Thank you. In calling this meeting to order, I want to thank you all for coming. I know it is so ungodly hot outside that it's hard to get from the car to the house, or the car to an air-conditioned building to breathe, but
Call our official meeting to order, though?
that's what I'm doing right now.
Pledge of
Yes.
allegiance.
Now we have the call to order and a pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, can we have the roll call, please?
Ms. Hamilton,
Present.
Mr. Dobies, Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Ms. Acton,
Here.
Ms. Hunt,
Here.
and Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Here. Okay, at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Support.
All in favor?
Discussion?
Excuse me, discussion first.
So I have a question. Maybe I'm missing it, but I thought the board voted last month to have a conversation, action item around the equity audit. Am I not seeing it on here? Am I missing it?
The board asked me to bring a timeline back, and candidly, we're just not there yet. I don't have a timeline of a script. We didn't bring an action item. We weren't gonna have an action. The most I could have come up with was a plan for how to create a roadmap to a district discussion, and I don't have that today. It's just, time and it was not something we could get pulled off within a month. So, no, it's not there.
Okay, so my question around that is, when the board votes, so that makes sense, just so you know, that, because you didn't have, the information that we needed to discuss. So I'm seeing on here, the minutes from last month, it says that to put on the June agenda for action to discuss thoroughly, make recommendations, and have further deliberations. That one was withdrawn, but then how a plan we might proceed, and bring a strategy for continuing the discussion at least. And that was approved. I'm wondering though, when the board votes to take an action, when does the superintendent decide not to do that without the board voting to say, yeah, we can take it off the agenda? Like, I'm just trying to understand, because if it's happening, like we're taking it off, which makes sense, just so you know, it makes sense, you're not ready, that's okay. But if we voted for it to be put on the agenda, why isn't it put on the agenda? And then that be the statement or the explanation that's given at that time versus taking it off, since the board did vote to put it on the agenda. Just help me understand.
Yeah, no, that was my call. I simply, without the ability to have that, we don't have any information to present, so I don't have anything to
So
discuss.
my question is, when are we taking it off without the board's approval? That's the question. So I get why you took it
Nope,
off.
nope, I
But we didn't
understand.
have an opportunity to discuss that because you took it off, but we had said, let's put it on there. So I'm trying to understand, when does that take place? Why is that okay?
Well, I guess the answer might be in
Adam.
board policy as to why the superintendent sets the agenda. But the reality is that I don't have that for
Wait
you.
a minute, did you
so
say the
can-
superintendent sets the agenda?
That's correct.
Hold on, wait a minute, okay. So the
But if you
board,
would like to add it to
No,
the
no, no.
agenda as an amendment,
what I want
now
to
would be
know,
the time
I'm just
to
trying
do
to
that.
understand, I'm trying to understand, when we vote to say this is that, or this is that, or whatever, which we voted last month to say, put this on the agenda, and it's not on the agenda, I'm trying to understand how that takes place. How do you take it off the agenda? Now, so your reason why, like I said, it makes sense. You know, putting it on the agenda, and then when we come to that portion saying, board, the update for this is ... that would make sense. But if you are deciding to take things off the agenda, because the board actually sets the agenda, which, you know, as a superintendent who sits at the table, you can help us do that. But anyways, though, as it's the ones who set the agenda, if we say put it on the agenda, what makes you think it's okay for you to take it off? I'm trying to understand that.
You have my answer, Ms. Hamilton.
Which is what, that
Madam Chair,
because you couldn't figure it out, or?
like to
That doesn't make sense to me.
make an amendment to the agenda to include an additional item around the district equity policy on discussion items underneath the secondary handbook
Second.
number.
Second. Okay. Second. Discussion? We just had? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion passed. That will go on as an action item that will be addressed as discussion item, I'm sorry. Moved to a discussion item, which we just discussed. Okay. Approval of agenda. Where are we in that? Discussion's done? Amended agenda? Discussion's done? All in favor? We just voted? We're good. Okay. We have an amended agenda and approval. Okay, superintendent's report.
All right. So a couple things on the superintendent's report. The first one, I'm going to let Jeremy and Julie speak to our 98B reporting. So if you guys want to take lead on that, I would appreciate it.
Okay, so twice a year, we bring 98B reporting to the board. We do it after our winter testing, and we bring it back again after we complete spring testing. The benchmark test that we are using kindergarten through 8th grade is NWEA. And buildings select a goal for themselves based on how they did the previous year. And then they report out on how many students hit the target that was set for them when they took their fall test. And so what you see is a percentage of students that hit the target that was set for them when they started the year. And so that's what you're seeing for K through 8th grade students. It looks a little different for high school students. In our grades 9 through 12, they don't have to use the benchmark assessment according to the law, and so they use other measuring tools.
So at Jackson High School, they kind of tell a story, and ultimately our goal is to see our students progress towards graduation. And so that's the data that you see for grades 9 through 12 on how the students are doing, progressing with the required number of credits from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th grade and what they need to graduate from high school. So they'll tell a story about where we were last year, where we were this year, and their success rate and students that are on track, and maybe some other identifiers or why students are not on track. In SEMV, are full-time virtual students, so the students that come in do the test. It's not 100% of students because that's hard to do to get all the students to come to the school, but again, grades K through 8 do use NWA testing at SEMV and middle school at Parkside 4th Street Learning Center. Are there any questions at this time, or you have further discussion, Julie?
That's all I have.
I
Any
have
questions? Okay.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe each of you will take a section or something. But can you just kind of walk through a little bit, at least one of these elementary ones to kind of explain what we're seeing,
Okay.
what we're understanding. And then same
Yep.
thing for the,
Yes.
the other ones. Thank you.
Yep. So, let me see which one I've got pulled up here first.
I can start with Jackson High School. I have Jackson High School pulled up. So you have 3 years of end of the year academic data. So there's a column for 2021-22, which looks at, it starts with the freshman class, and then the next row is the sophomore class, and then junior class. And they kind of have highlighted each year on the success rate. So the students have 18 opportunities to earn a credit. And so you need so many credits to progress to the next grade, and that is the success rate if they earned enough. This also includes opportunities, extra opportunities in summer school and or credit recovery courses. So although we're presenting this number now for 2023, 2024, students will have additional opportunities in summer school to progress and increase those success rates. So they've kind of highlighted what we're really focusing in on. And in addition to the kids who are not successful at this point in time, there'll be other opportunities. Students do not need 18 credits a year, so there's already kind of a built-in catch-up system. So if I have a poor 9th grade year, if I do well 10th, 11th, and 12th, I can still graduate with my cohort without taking additional credits, just depending on what that number is. So that's what you see for Jackson High School end-of-year academic data is credits towards graduation over multiple years. So you can see if we're getting better, kind of the same, or not so much.
Jeremy, just to follow up on that. The success rate, so that makes sense, thank you. Does this also tell us what the expected is? Like, so am I able to compare this, or is this just this is what has happened? Like, because I think in the elementary, is there some comparison available in that? Like the state wants this is where we are. Am I seeing that in the elementary?
Yes, so I think what you're asking is what does it take to progress from grade to grade? So
Nope, not what I'm asking.
Okay.
So, and this might not even be, it might not even apply to this. And if it doesn't, just tell me that, because I
Okay.
just don't know. But I thought that I'm seeing in the elementary section that there's this is what's expected, and then this is where we are. This is where we measured against that. I don't know if I'm seeing that or not. And I don't know, does the J-High that you're showing us, does it say, this is what the state expects, this is where we met, or no? I just wondered.
No.
How do I compare it?
No.
Okay.
It's just basically provide a narrative on progress towards meeting the goals outlined by the school.
Okay,
And
but
of
we
course, the
outlined,
high
okay.
school is following the Michigan Merit Curriculum.
Okay. And so we're determining the success rate as far as like, this is what where we want to meet. This is how far we met of that we want to meet area. That makes sense?
Yes, but the end in mind is graduation. And so that's a state requirement of
Okay.
what students need to be successful.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so looking at an elementary, one of the elementary 98B reports, I've just got Cascades in front of me. So the first table are the goals that were set for reading, middle of the year and end of the year.
We set those. Is that right?
Yes, the
Okay.
buildings do.
Okay.
And then, you'll probably see them set different ones next year based on how they did this year. So they'll try to grow a little bit each year. And then you'll see math, middle of the year and end of the year. And then table B shows results by student groups. So starting with all students, what you see there for the middle columns, you're seeing the February results. So in the fall, they take the assessment, they get an initial score, it sets a goal for them. The kids that met their middle of the year goal, that's the percentage you see there for February, for reading and for math. We do it again in May, and you'll see the percent of kids that hit their end of the year goal for reading and for math. So you've got it according to, it's broken down by student demographics in table B. And when you get to table C, it's broken down by grade level. And then at the bottom, the bottom should match all students, because when these were originally released to us and the state gave these to us to use, we had to differentiate between students that were in person and students that were virtual only. And in all of our elementary schools and most of our secondary schools, with the exception of SCMV, we're all in person now. So now Table D is going to look just like all students does farther up on the table or on the 98B.
Okay.
Okay?
So these numbers are telling us the percentage of students who've reached their,
Who hit their personal goal for the year. Yep.
okay, thank you. Last question.
Sure.
Would we take this information, because if I'm understanding you correctly, you know, and if I'm looking at the table, the chart, table B, and I'm looking at the breakdown by race, I'm seeing that, you know, some of us, the percentages in some of the groups are higher, lower. How do we address those things? You know, what's that look like? Because I'm guessing that that's what this is for us to be able to say, okay, this is that, and this is what we're going to do. What's some of the things that we, you know, give me a for example, if you don't mind.
So individual schools will look at those results and look back at the NWEA results themselves and use that information to determine what the needs are for specific students, individual students. So, and by doing that, by addressing the needs of specific students, the individual students, by doing small groups and looking at kids that need specific, they need help with specific state standards and putting them in groups and working on those things. This is more, when you look at when you look at MSTEP data, it's the end of the year. People call it sort of like autopsy data. This is how it wound up this year. There's not much we can do with that other than try to improve programs for next year with a totally different group of kids.
Right.
This is really used, NWEA, it's called benchmark data because it allows us an opportunity to look at it and change course and address what we're seeing. So, you know, you are seeing where we wound up at the end of the year, but just know that the other 2 times that we're giving it, and then it will be used again at the beginning of next year for kids, that it really is with the intention of seeing where kids are, what they need to learn, and then using that to drive future instructional decisions.
Thank you. And then you gave me some examples. You said like small group learning and some of those.
Small groups, sometimes individual.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll look at that, and if that needle's not moving at all, it might be, if we've tried the interventions, it might be that we take that as part of another data set and say, maybe this student needs some deeper intervention. Maybe they need some other supports.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just a minute, I was just curious, how do the, like, is it up to the principal to do the building goals, or how do you do that? Because
We
they're all
have-
different, every
Yeah, we've
building.
allowed them in the past to select their own, and very often it has to do with how they kind of wound up at the end of the previous year. And, but the expectation will be, I mean, wherever they landed this year, as an average for all of their students, we're going to want them to, next year's goal should be an increment higher. So we aren't setting the same goals for every building because every building is different. It has its own group of students who have their own special needs. And so we are looking for growth every year from students and then also from the building. So we will be intentional about using this data to help us set next year's goals.
How does that compare, like, with the state averages? Is there a way to, how are we doing? Or do
There
we
are
have to go
two
to
different
errors?
pieces. I mean, that's where we really need to look at MSTEP data to compare those two, because this is really student growth,
Okay.
how far we could get a student in a year. But
Okay.
understanding they come to us all
Right.
along the spectrum. A kindergarten
Right.
classroom is very much a one-room schoolhouse of old.
Right.
We have kids that are reading chapter books, and we have kids that are just learning how to write a letter. And so, and it continues up like that. So we're really looking at our progress by focusing on growth, whereas MSTEP really focuses on where students are with relation to other students at their grade level.
Which would be on the errors report.
Right.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll just add that they always say not to look at one piece of evidence. So to look at your state level, your local level, your teacher assessment, to look at multiple data to see if there's any alignment or any notice and wonderings there. So we don't put all our eggs in one basket kind of a deal. So our teachers are looking at multiple data points throughout the school year, and NWA happens 3 times a year in the beginning, middle, and end. So that's helpful.
Thank you. So the AIRS is the annual education report, if people don't know what that is. So thank you.
One more question. Did I miss the school improvement meeting today? Was it today? Okay, but this type of information, we go over this in that meeting, don't we? Okay, so it's for the community, just so you all know, we do have school improvement meetings and we're able to dive in a little bit deeper, just so you know. But I just wanted to make sure that this information was in there because I thought we did. Thanks.
Are there any other questions on 98B? All right, I've got actually one more piece I just need to share for superintendents. So there are, this is just informational for folks. There are 2 issues on the ballot in August that will be very important to us. The very first is the operating millage. Kind of explain what this looks like. I know Marcus mentioned it briefly. So the foundation allowance that we receive comes in 2 portions. It comes in a state-funded portion, and it comes in a local tax portion. And the state expects every district in Michigan to garner 18 mills on non-homestead and business property. We currently do that today, so in fact, I think the last time we went and asked the voters to extend that out was in 2020. And we typically ask for more than 18 mills. We typically ask for roughly 20 mills, knowing that we will never collect that because by law we're only ever allowed to collect 18. But that allows that when the taxable value shifts, we don't actually have to come back to the voters and ask for that 18 mills every year. So, so we just ask for it as the property values change and that those taxes go down, the 18 mills goes down, it'll go from 20 down to 18, and then we'll ask again. This is our opportunity in August or to ask. This has no impact on primary properties. So your property tax at home is not affected by this operating levy at all. It's the only place where the operating funds of the district, that school aid fund, is impacted by local taxes. And so if we don't pass, because I always get asked this, what happens, then we will collect less than 18 mills, and the state does not make up the difference. So if we don't collect the 18 mills, if we collect 17 mills, those are foundational dollars that we will not get because the state's not going to backfill that. And so we get the minimum foundation allowance in the state. So if we don't collect the full 18 mills, our students would receive less than the minimum foundation allowance. In other words, less than every other student in the state of Michigan. So very important to us. I hope folks will pay attention to it. We really, if you've got questions on it, there'll be a flyer. We're gonna get some information out to folks so that you can see just exactly what this does and how this impacts us. But the operating millage does not impact, again, I want to make certain I repeat this, does not impact your primary residence. This is second homes, businesses, anything that's non-homestead. The other one is the Parks and Rec millage. We have been in business with Parks and Rec since the 1940s. I don't know why it was set up this way, but when everybody looks at their tax bill, they go, hey, Jeff, there's another JPS tax item on the bill, and that's Parks and Rec. I just need everybody to understand that's a 100% flow through. We don't take any dollars away from that. We don't run an administrative fee. Every dollar that comes into that flows through to Parks and Rec, and those dollars support the programs that support our kids. And I think that's how we got into this from the beginning. So those are 2 issues that are on the ballot that will have JPS on them. So I share this so everybody's got that information, but obviously the operating millage is going to be significant for us, and this would allow us, again, not to have to come back and knock on your door again down the road, because what happens is if you don't pass an operating millage, you got to come back and ask again, because again, the state's not going to backfill those dollars. So just kind of food for thought for everybody. That's what I've got for the superintendent's report for the month of June.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, discussion.
So I have a question about MHSAA, the participating resolution. So I get it and I understand it. Hopefully the audience is understand this is just something we have to sign so our students can participate in state stuff, sports related. Question though is, I see that I know we've always had it like this, but I want to understand why. We've got J High on here and middle school at Parkside. What has to happen for South Central, Pathways, or 4th Street Learning to be able to participate in these?
Pathways actually participates with Jackson High today. 4th Street does not with Parkside. It's an alternative program, so it just serves a different purpose, and same thing for SCMV. You actually have to, in order to participate, you have to be on campus for more than half the day, so that kind of rules SCMV out of the mix. But Pathways participates with Jackson High sports teams today.
Okay, and we don't need to name them because they already are able to participate from that way?
Correct. We just put their numbers in with the Jackson High count.
And you said 4th Street Learning because they're not on, what's their reason? I understand SCMV, they're not on
Yeah,
campus.
they're an alternative program, so we just don't count them in for that athletic purpose.
Could they be counted in since they're on campus? Could we have sports over there? I mean, could they participate with Parkside? Like what, could they? I would imagine, I know that sports is a big draw a lot of times.
The answer is yes, but probably not. So
Or-
again, you have to meet, again, so the answer is no, they probably would not participate. And we would not participate them given the reasons that we use 4th Street Learning Center for. So it's an alternative program that helps students who struggle with academics and behavior, two things that will disqualify you from participating in athletics.
Have we ever had them participate? Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in
Yeah,
favor? Oh, Derek?
Just a minute.
Go ahead.
Oh, wouldn't it be beneficial if they had more help coaches? I mean, would
More
it be
what?
if they could participate? I always think coaches are really wonderful.
Oh, they
for
wouldn't
kids.
qualify for MHSAA just from grades.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Okay,
lot of
just
that
need
kind
to
of
know
stuff.
that.
So
Yeah.
Okay, got
the
it.
disqualifiers for
Got it,
for
get
4th Street
grades.
Learning Center typically
Okay.
are academics but behavior.
Okay.
And so if you are, it's primarily those two things. If you're
Okay.
not passing your classes, you're not going to participate on the athletic team.
Pathways,
you-
Okay.
Pathways
Could you,
is,
to the
so.
answer to that question, yes. But
Okay.
remember that Pathways is not a
Right.
behavior concern. That's a
Right.
school within a school. And those students have to meet the same academic standards in order to participate that Jackson High does.
Okay.
So
All right. Thank you.
Derek?
Yeah, I just had a question on the Power School stuff. Does, on the renewal, on the renewal contract, it says analytics and insights. I've had some contact with administrators about Power School implementing like discipline and equity data and things like that. Does this allow for the importing of academic data? Will Power School allow for the importing of academic data from other like third-party vendors that we use for testing and stuff so that it's all in the same spot, or?
well, all right. So the answer, Julie, you could help me out. The answer is yes, maybe, and no, maybe. So some software that we use, and Power School's pretty particular about which companies they allow to send data up and down. And sometimes it's very smooth. We have spent some dollars recently, I think even last month. Julie, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we've been going through the process of mapping this new tool. We talked about it when it was approved. And we're really excited about it because it's a great early warning tool for us, but we're in the process of learning it. But we've imported data from MSTEP and PSAT and NWEA, and we'll continue to import our data so we can use that information along with attendance, grades, and the things that already live in Power School to be able to find students that are struggling and to put them into intervention groups and then to track their progress. So it's a great tool. It's going to be a big lift for us to learn how to use it. We're still working on it. We're getting the data that's currently in Power School mapped to the new tool that we're using. It's called Power School Unified Insights, MTSS. And so we're going to be able to do our reports for our individual reading instructional plans for students in grades K through 3, because we'll be able to use the data that it's pulling from all of the assessments. But we'll be able to do all of that in there. We'll be able to do our 504s in there. It's just, we're going to be able to pull from a lot of different places that we haven't been able to in the past because things just don't talk to each other very well.
Yeah, it's been what got raised to me, so. Okay.
Okay, now I call for a vote.
Yeah.
Approving the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passed. Let's continue. Item 7, action items. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, my fault. I didn't turn my paper all the way over. Citizens requesting to attend to address the board. As you know, there are 5-minute opportunities. And today we have 3, so I'm going to just call the 3 and we'll just go in order. John King, Nicholas Thurston, and William Hastings. John?
I'm John King. I live at 203 3rd Street here in the city, a few blocks away. I kind of have a mess of notes. I jotted down. I apologize for the mess. Back on MLK Day earlier this year, the person I call Pastor Antichrist was given the chance to speak at Lily Missionary Baptist Church. In it, he mentioned to the crowd that it was in his DNA that he was white supremacist. I consider that, especially in a religious manner, to be evil, to suggest white people are white supremacists. It's in their DNA and there's nothing they can do about it. Also, from a non-religious matter, with Pastor Antichrist, a lot of the others that support Keisha Hamilton's comments on social media, I just think some of these people are sick that they support stuff like that, kind of a self-hate. And that's where with DEI, I'm sort of worried about the school board right now with the way they might be handling that. From Derek Dobie's perspective, it's political. It's an election year, like I mentioned. So, it's the way to take advantage of politics to, suggest, the diversity and to make a lot of suggestions of all the racism and this is a bad country. Keisha Hamilton, I think, takes it from a racism perspective. Now, of course, she'll say, oh, I can't be racist. She's done that before. It's Juneteenth, like tomorrow's sort of the official day where it celebrates when the Union soldiers went into Texas and alerted everyone that, slavery was not supposed to be practiced anymore. At the time, they couldn't attach a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation on an email and send it there. It was the soldiers that had to go down there and basically say, nope, slavery's over with. It was not black soldiers, in the Civil War, it was not black soldiers that won it for the North. There were so many people that were involved that died for the cause to, try to make it out, at such a racism. And, even with DEI, it's like a lot of people are pushing segregation now. We need to get away from the segregation, the politics, and the racism of DEI. And as MLK said, treat people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Nicholas Thurston. Up, turn your mic on.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Thurston. I live here in Jackson, Michigan, Ward 5, 410 Van Buren Street, city. This is my school. I went to JPS schools my whole life. I also agree very strongly with what was said by John King. He is 100% correct. There is a lot of divisive ulterior motives behind what is being labeled as DEI, and we see this across the country. And many states have moved to ban DEI using language that is similar to what we already have in the state of Michigan Constitutional Amendment 26. We see more and more universities, public school districts, at various different levels of governmental agencies either considering or going through with banning DEI policies and practices. They are discriminatory, and oftentimes identity extremists like Keisha Hamilton hide behind those messages in writing, but then their actions, always speak louder than words. In the last handful of years, we saw some housing instability in the city of Jackson, and Keisha Hamilton was involved with a company called Residents in Action, and they have taken pretty much every opportunity to constantly promote racism, even against a homeless person. So if being racist against kids that go to Jackson Public Schools isn't bad enough, she's also racist against homeless people. Numerous people came to me in my neighborhood saying they were facing discrimination, accessing a homeless shelter, or getting direct financial aid from Community Action Agency, where Keisha Hamilton does work, and they've also sort of adopted their own corporate DEI policies and practices. But the state and federal law has already outlawed any forms of discrimination in housing or housing-related services with the Fair Housing Act that was passed in the 60s. And we see, like I said, a lot of these people that claim to be about fairness and equality are actually the ones that are doing the most discrimination themselves once they get behind the bus, start driving it. But yeah, I would like the district to strike down any further discussions or implementations of equity policies. I would also like to see the DEI department completely dismantled in its entirety in order to comply with what is required of you by the state of Michigan Constitution, and for the betterment of the educational system we have here in Jackson Public Schools, and for all of your students and personnel. It should be a dead issue, being that it's been banned since 2006. Should have never made it to any agenda discussions or anything like that. Also, the people that were hired to do the equity assessment for the district, you should look into their background. They have very controversial stuff going on there. But yeah, it doesn't look very good. I am concerned about the future of the students here. We didn't have to grow up in that environment. We didn't have to go to schools that had that sort of language, or board members that said all of us were evil because of the color of our skin. And the students here today deserve the same exact education that we got and the same support from the board members that we received too when we were younger. If anybody on this board said all black people on earth were evil, or just flip what is being said. If they're saying, ABC is the evil because of this protected class, flip that and then say, okay, is it okay now if somebody says those things? Obviously not. Everybody would be upset. I'd be just as upset. I think John King would also be just as upset. And because of the color of his skin, people are trying to invalidate his passion for fairness and equality in the school system or housing or local government by claiming he's a white supremacist when me and him are neighbors. We get along just fine. We agree on a lot of the same things. He's never said or done anything wrong to me. I've never known him to do anything wrong to anybody. And there's a lot of people that were from Jackson, Michigan, who contributed to the end of slavery and the abolitionist movement. So you're saying that the families of, well, not you in specific, but a board member is saying that the families of people who ended slavery are also evil. She's not saying that racism is wrong or that slavery was bad. She's saying that white people are evil. And we expect a lot of the same type of identity extremists to, target our school districts. And we see it across the state, we see it across the country. And that's why a lot of colleges and state governments and also the federal government is considering a total ban of the practice. It's wolves in sheep clothing, unfortunately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. William Hastings.
So I think I'm going to begin with the proposed 2025 bond. I think my comments will end with the 2025 bond, and we'll just have to follow the meandering pace that takes us from beginning to end. So when we start to look at enrollments at JPS, and there's enrollment information in tonight's packet, it's pretty informative. You can't get pure apples to apples on enrollment versus county population because county population comes in 10-year increments via the census. But we do know as a baseline that between 2010 and 2020, the population of Jackson County increased 0.1%. So essentially flat with a very small amount of growth. I don't have 2010 to 2020 information for JPS, but working off your student count information here, if we use 2018 school year, so it's in 2018, at the close of, during the summer of 2018 when that bond was passed, and use that as a baseline, we see that enrollment, despite all the spending and all the new buildings and the new field house and the new Olympic pool, the student count's down 5%. Now, there's also a little asterisk factor in that when you look at these enrollment numbers, they include people who are enrolled in the South Central Michigan virtual. And I had some questions earlier for the superintendent about that, which he did answer, and now I'm getting fuzzy. And I think we're talking the approximate enrollment. There was about 304. Okay. So I went with the lower number. So if you walk out those people who fall under the rubric of JPS, but they don't come in the buildings, it's sort of like a school of choice, additional choice for kids all across Jackson County. But if you walk those out of the 2018 numbers to the present, then you're looking at a 10.6% decline. Now, if you want to look at the 10-year number, the 2014-15 school year to the projected enrollment for the 2024-25 school year, then we're looking at a 13% decline in JPS enrollment, excluding those numbers. In other words, not walking out the numbers for South Central Michigan virtual. If you walk them out, then you're looking at an 18.4% decline. So I think this really, people, when you put this side by side with the spending, and you look at side by side with the enrollment numbers across Jackson number and the population stats, it seems like that the very large, the $90 million 2018 bond issue hasn't quite delivered what was anticipated in terms of enrollment. So I strongly believe that this board is going to be putting itself and JPS in a very perilous position to pass this if they go ahead and do a full Thelma and Louise and drive off the cliff in the name of passing a radical, racially discriminatory and divisive series of policies that fly in the face of U.S. civil rights law and fly in the case of Michigan civil rights law. I think if you pass such a measure, it is going to poison the well with the voters of this district, especially the voters of Summit, in my opinion. And it is going to fatally imperil, I believe, the passage of this measure in 2025. I'd also add that, you know, a lot of the discussion of this goes back to various racial aspects of it. Well, there's a whole lot that's loaded into the Adobe's and Hunt proposal about gender language and gender expression, gender identity. And may I remind the board that if we were to hop in our car and take a little road trip up to DeWitt Public Schools, they were just in the national news. You know why? You know why? Because they decided that they're going to push on their 5 to 7-year-olds, their kindergarten to second graders, instruction on gender and pronouns, quote, to share and explore pronouns through discussion, to embrace differences, unquote, and to help the kids practice the pronouns, specifically they and them. Well, this came to a very, very fast halt because the parents came in, as one would expect, with torches, with pitchforks, and the heads on the board members and the administration, they're spun around very, very fast. So I would strongly suggest, I think the best way forward is just to simply just let this abomination die in the crib. Do not bring it forward for a vote. Thanks.
Thank you, William. Thank you. Lost my paper I was writing on here. Okay, now we're going to the common pages of the elementary and the secondary and for discussion. And I did want to refresh everybody's mind what Robert's rules and our board policy says about this discussion period. Robert's Rules of Orders, which we adopted as our parliamentary procedure manual, and our own board policy manual. Discussion of any items, the time constraint for speaking, order of speaking, and how many times a board member can speak on each item is clearly identified. Any item a board member can speak on no more than 2 times. Once a board member has had his or her turn, the second time does not come up until all of those who wanted to speak have spoken their first time on any agenda item. So that's just a reminder. Okay, we have elementary common pages for the handbook. Julie?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'll move to take discussion items 23, 24, 127, and 23, 24, 128, and move those to the July meeting under action items.
Okay, 23, 24.
There's no changes.
For the July meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you moving?
Moving to forward them on to as action items in July.
As
I
the
mean,
action item and not discussion items today at all?
there's no updates to that. So
Okay.
I'll just not talk about it.
I'd like to discuss some things in it. So can we move it to discussion item next month or something?
Well, it's a discussion item still.
Oh, yeah, I just was, I just wanted to discuss some things in it, under hang on. It's under the sex education part of the elementary handbook. I was wondering if we couldn't, instead of an opt-out, which I think is hard for parents to download all that and do all that, what about an opt-in?
I don't think that that's actually, I'll confirm this before next month, but I think the opt-out is the state law language, not the opt-in. So I think we're.
So that's state law?
Well, I think you have to provide the opt-out per state law. I think that's the conversation. So I won't speak to that without knowing it for next month, but that's my belief.
Okay, so it's a state law, okay.
That we have to provide an opt-out.
But we can't change it to opt-in? Because it's a state law?
We would still have to provide an opt-out. Does that make sense?
No.
Yeah,
What that means is that everybody takes it unless the parents ask that their kids opt out of it. And if they don't opt out, they take it with health class.
How do we communicate that to the parents right now? How are we
They're
doing
all
that?
pretty aware of it, I think.
How is it that they are, though?
In my experience, as principal.
You want to walk through how the handbook pages are signed off on?
I'm just curious how the parents are informed.
Well, it's here in the handbook. I think it's online as well, and I'm pretty sure that the teachers probably send that home when the students enroll in a course. So I'm not positive on every teacher. I know it's an expectation in every building, and I'm trying to see what the duration is. So I'd have to confirm that with the teachers, because I know the parents look at our handbook pretty closely when they're looking for things, and I know the forms are being turned in, so.
Yeah, because it says here, for a class in which the subjects of family planning or reproductive health are discussed, the district shall notify the parents of the fact that the student will be enrolled in the course and notify the parents about the content of the instruction. Parents shall be given prior opportunity to review the materials to be used and shall be advised in advance of the parent's right to have their child excused from the instruction. So I was just kind of curious, is that, so the teachers probably inform the parents?
Actually, that happens for every grade. So when you do 5th grade, that happens. When you do
Right.
middle school, that happens. When we do the sex ed portion of health at the high school, that happens. And so those are specific periods in time, and that curriculum review is what's provided to every student who's enrolled in that class. So separate from the handbook piece, if a student says, I'm enrolled in our freshman health class or health at the high school, we go through the sex ed curriculum. We provide those parents with opportunity to come in, review that curriculum, and opt out of participation. Same thing goes with elementary, same thing goes with middle school.
So they're notified with a handout or email or with,
I'm pretty sure it's in the registration packet
The
too, so that's
okay,
a paper handout every time you
Okay.
meet with the school or administrator.
Okay,
And I'm
that's what I
pretty
needed
sure
to
it's in the
know.
packet.
okay, thank you.
I will say too, as a parent, if you're missing any part of like that, for instance, they're on you about, you need to turn it in. So then to make sure that you received it and read it.
So a little bit more discussion on that. I think clarity might be of benefit that, when we get a discussion item, usually the next month we do an action item with that discussion item. So I don't know if that's helpful or not for some of us up here. But I did have some questions on the secondary handbook pages. So if we're looking at page 1, I'm looking at the last paragraph. It says, through this policy, the board directs the establishment of a parental involvement plan. Is this new, this parental involvement plan? How long have we had that? What is it?
No, we have a parent involvement piece component for every building. And again, I think that's part of the pieces that the board has supported even this last year with a hiring of additional parent liaisons for that specific. And then we're still working on what their scripted rollout is, because that varies a little bit by building, but again, some of those opportunities, we see significant, opportunities at Parkside. We see some lessening changes or different changes here at Jackson High, different elementaries. But the reality is, yes, every building's got a parent involvement component in their plan.
Now, so as a parent of JPS students myself, I don't know if I've ever, and I'm just wondering because I've never seen it. I don't know if I've ever seen a parental involvement plan, school partnership that's established with each parent. I'm just trying to understand, what is it exactly? Because my children have been here for a long time, and I don't know that I've ever seen hey, this is your student, we need to, or is it, or have I seen it and I don't know that this is what it's called? Like, what I mean? What is it? So what is it then? What does it look like?
What the high school has produced, so you've got that in front of you, so you can see it next.
Okay, that'll be helpful. And I didn't get the elementary pages, they weren't ready. So Michelle, when they're ready, I'm guessing they're probably ready by now. I'll come and get them because I'll probably have questions next month on that one too. Another question, and this is just kind of all related to this parental involvement plan for you to be able to come back and answer these things, next month, who's ever coming back. On the second page, under the effective communication, preparing families to be involved. I'm on number 7, B, effective communication 7, preparing families to be involved in meaningful discussions and meeting with school staff. I'm just wondering, I'd like to have an example of what that looks like. Like I said, I was just like, what is a parental involvement plan? I've been here basically almost my whole life, and my kids too, and I've never seen this. So some of these things, again, coming back, what does that look like? I would like an example.
You probably have seen some of those pieces, like when you look at a freshman orientation, or you look at those. I know Monica runs dinners for every grade. And I'm not, again, I don't want to speak to it because I don't want to tell you what's there and not there. I would rather have them come and share. But Monica rolls out. I know she does. So I'll give you, like I said, the freshman roll up, the 8th grade roll up. There's meetings. We do the same thing with JCEC, where we invite parents to come in. There's a parent conversation about how to help your students through Jackson County Early College. There's a conversation about what graduation requirements. There's a conversation, and it's usually done with several folks, counselors and principals, and usually a class advisor, things along those lines. And they're usually done in the evenings, but again, I don't want to tell you what it's called because I don't want to misspeak, but I will have Jeremy and Monica be prepared to be able to answer that for you.
So when they, and thank you, Jeff. So when they come back in July and we had this conversation, just so you know, I'm really interested in this parental involvement plan piece, and I would love to hear examples of what these things can look like. You know, for example, preparing families for involvement, the volunteer opportunities. You know, I'd love to know, what does these kind of things look like? Just some examples I think would be good for the community to know as well. Engaging families in decision-making and advocacy. What does that look like? I mean, it's good stuff. I just want to understand, you know, how do we kind of do some of these things? And then collaborating with the community. Again, just, I would love to hear some examples of kind of what we're doing in these spaces when we come back.
Yep, and I think that's all easy stuff. I want to make sure I get it for you, and those are pieces those are not a problem for you.
Thanks.
Done with handbooks? Discussion? Okay. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
I think we had a motion by
Yeah.
Support.
You withdrew. Okay,
It'll be on there for action next month.
okay. What are we voting on? Nothing.
No, I think we have an equity discussion that was added on the amended agenda. So I know that didn't make the cut here on the screen, but so we have an added discussion item, the equity script, I think, are I don't know how we want to describe it, but that's what I'll lead with.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to postpone the, let's see, what was it used? Bear with me here. The discussion around the equity policy and steps forward on that to the August 20th school board meeting.
August 20th board meeting. Okay.
As an action item.
Is there a second? Discussion?
Yes, I have some discussion on that. Two things. One, I'm hoping that, you know, well, we do have a recording from the conversation that we had in whatever month we had it. It must have been May. And hopefully we're going back and we're looking through that to see what the board was referring to and where it was going, so that when you come back, you'll be, you know, at least addressing those directions that we were going in. And that was community engagement and da-da-da, you know, whatever. You know, so hopefully we'll get some specifics along that line, even if it's just, you know, this is the plan going forward. Like, I'm okay with that, but I would like to see that we've addressed the board's will. Second thing, as often as I am in disagreement with the board's will, when the board's will is put out there, the board's will should be followed. We are elected to sit at this table and do what we do, and when we vote, the superintendent should not be taking anything off the agenda without our express intervention or express vote. So I'm very concerned about that. Like I said, I don't have an issue with why it was taken off the agenda, but to take it off after we said put it on is a huge concern of mine. And I'm hoping that we'll never see that happen again without the boards being the ones who decide to take it off. Because again, we've been elected to do this job and to make those votes. And like I said, as often as I'm in disagreement with the way the board votes, the board's vote is what we have to abide by. Thank you.
Okay, where are we at this point? Any other discussion? No? Okay, all in favor?
1 second.
Oh, yes.
Derek, I was just clarifying what you said for your motion. Action by August
To
or discussion?
postpone to action item for August 20th.
August 20 action item. Okay,
Whatever is proposed as an action item, you want to amend or postpone to additional meeting for more discussion.
mm-hmm.
That's allowable.
Absolutely.
What I might ask, and this is just an ask, what I might ask is to assist in this process, because it's complicated. Is the board interested in forming a subcommittee to potentially work on what this scripting might look like, so that there's some opportunity for board input into where this thing goes? Because I think the challenge that we run into, certainly within the last month, skip the stuff that we're working on with regards to technology and budget and so on right now, the conversation is and Keisha, to your point, there's a lot of community input that we would be seeking prior to any adoption, and what that schedule might look like or what that might look like, candidly, I think that might be better led from the Board of Education, since the board is looking to create this policy. So I'm game. I'm asking if there's an appetite for a board work committee or work group that might be interested in meeting to help script some of this out.
In May, I suggested that. That was the suggestion, that the board have a work group, an equity work group, where we kind of put that work together. We put that work in. So I'm definitely, that's what I was referring to when I said, let's refer back to the video, because you'd see that in that video, I did suggest that we, create a work group where we could have those conversations that you're talking about right now. And as well, I know Dobies has his motion on the table. I would like to still have an update in July, just even if it's just, we're still working on it, we're still, we've gotten these, we have some better ideas. Because even now I would like to know, has there been any discussions around it, or has it just been, let's not touch it because we're not going to have it on the agenda. But I would like to know what's going on just in general, even if it's just a quick update. I would like to know that. But yeah, like I said, in May, I actually did suggest that already.
A lot of the discussion came centered around the fact that we really do need the board to take a leadership initiative in regard to this if the board's going to adopt the policy. It's really a very challenging spot to be in the middle from an administrative standpoint, to go, how can I meet the board's will? That's why I think we really need that work group. So to be fair, we're not ready, but we couldn't be ready if I tried at this point. And all cards on the table where we're at. But if there's a work group, Michelle can send out some dates and folks can drop in and participate. That would be my ask of the board with regard to this.
Okay, so we're not talking about, the two things I had that were mentioned during that May meeting were a meeting of the whole and a committee that included parents and people, that aren't familiar with this at all. So what we're looking at this point is a board consortium.
So the suggestion that I was making in May is definitely, and thank you, Jeff, for just clarifying what I already said, but that is that, yes, this is a board-initiated policy, and clearly the board has to be involved. So with that in mind, to answer your question, Pam, the committee of the whole is something I think we should just do as in general, but not per se only around this equity policy. But the equity policy, yes, I do think that more voices, more of the board's representation should be allowed to be in those meetings. And I know sometimes, we can't have quorum unless whatever. So if we're creating this committee or whatever, let's create it in a way so that more of us can have conversations. And maybe it can look kind of similar to how the school improvement work groups are. I don't know how we get away with that, but something like that, where we could have the community with the board, as many of us that want to be involved. But again, I 100% agree that it's unfair to expect administration, even our DEI officer, to create something for us when we're the board. We're to create it and then definitely follow through with you all. But I do think 100% we need to be leading this policy.
Okay, so I guess I'll have Michelle put out some potential dates and folks who would like to participate. If we get more than a quorum, we'll post it as a public meeting. Does that sound reasonable to folks?
Sounds great.
And maybe that's just the July update. That's good for me.
That sounds good.
Well, I'm going to try to have the work groups. Obviously we got 4th of July, but beyond that, I'll try to have at least work group dates by July.
If possible,
Okay.
Okay. Now we are on,
Did we get a vote? I'm going to make sure.
still have a motion.
which one? Okay, Derek's motion.
For August. So
For August, for action, or whatever we decide to do at that point, maybe postpone,
So
more
July an
discussion.
update. Sounds like a July. You wanna change your motion, Dobies?
I think the discussion will take place. We'll at least have an update.
Yeah, discussion and update for July, and then action in August.
Is that what you were thinking, or not?
I'm happy to speak to the motion. Honestly, and I hear the administration's concerned about this as an issue that some have objected to in the community. By and large, I think that people across Jackson and across JPS are supportive of this work. I will reiterate that this board has also been supportive of the work. I think for us to get into a debate on that belittles the staff that we have in the room that come to work every day doing this work. In terms of board participation on a policy, I mean, I submitted a proposed policy to the board for consideration. This is the policy-making body. It's my understanding that there's a policy committee that also reviewed my initial draft, and actually when it appeared at this meeting, the draft that came from the policy committee was different from my original draft, so that there's already been work on this. I would speak against establishing another committee on this because I think that the policy committee has already reviewed that, which consisted of not myself, but at least Keisha and Shalonda. I'm not sure who else is on the policy in Maryland. So at least 4 of us have already touched this. My interest in referring this to the administration is to have the administration take maybe the initial and the redraft policy coming out of the policy committee, refer that to the administration to consider its implementation and what it would mean for its implementation, working with our diversity, equity, inclusion director, and bring something back to the board to consider how we move forward on that, without necessarily burying it in a bunch of committee work, because I think that at least the policy that I had proposed, and I agree with what came out of largely what came out of the policy committee, but the policy that I proposed came from largely another school district, larger school district in Michigan, and I think that there's just some administrative things to do between now and August around considering the implementation, running it by council, running it by, all the other organizations that we would with policy, bringing that back, some of those findings back to the board, having a discussion on it, and then having a discussion around whether we want to pass that policy or whether we want to chew on it some more at that point, instead of just.
Does the ISD have anything that's been drafted, the ISD for the county stuff?
I would doubt it. I'm
Are
not
we
sure.
familiar with other county schools who have drafted their policy?
Jackson Public's the leaders and the best, so.
Okay.
And there are other schools.
That shuts me right up.
Yeah, there are other school districts in Michigan, and I think this policy was actually kind of templated after another district that uses this policy. But to Derek's point, certainly we could speak to how administratively we would implement or report out on any given section within the current proposal. That we could speak to, and what we could do or couldn't do. But we're along for the ride. I'll be fair with you on this. Tell me how you want us to proceed. We'll do our part to try to meet those goals.
I'd like to just make sure we don't reinvent our own wheel. If we have things in our policy manual already that covers these areas, I would like to see them included in this policy discussion, not to have this group over here and this group of suggestions over here, or this policy here. If they cross, I'd like to see them all combined and put together. So there's not a matter of, well, this area says this thing and this area says that thing, and they're a little bit contradictory, and I would just like to have it all work. I understand when people say, we already have things in there if they were just enforced or followed or discussed even. I would like to see them not recreated, just different words, same meaning. Rather, I'd like to see something fresh, new, ours. In the entire county, there is no Jackson High equivalent. So we really, really do have to make sure we're doing the right thing. We will be followed, we will be copied. And that we don't reinvent our own wheel when we already have a wheel. I'd like to just see it put together. Rather than two separate things, like one doesn't have anything to do with the other, when it does completely.
I can guarantee that the only time equity appears in our policies is when it's referring to a financial position.
Okay, all right.
Marilyn
now-
Metter, were you gonna speak?
Pardon me?
So Derek, when you say the board is in agreement, you should own your statement because that's not true. Just saying. And the equity policy as written is discriminatory in my book. They don't, there's just, again, I'm gonna reiterate, it's a Pandora's box. I'm real concerned it would open us as a board up to liability and that we wouldn't have immunity as public servants.
Madam Chair, I know we've had an equity audit for our district. We've received those results. We've provided training to staff, a series of training to staff. And I guess for the purpose of discussion today, I would like to see if an equity audit is not our end goal, what do we want to see happen with the information that we've gathered? And how do we continue to move the equity practices that we envision forward in our district? So if it's not a policy, what is the board's understanding of being equitable in our practices and moving toward more inclusivity?
So two things. I know the motion, Derek's motion is just around when we're gonna have this discussion again. So I don't wanna confuse that with this other conversation that we're having around how do we move forward with it. So I think we need to make sure that we're remembering that. I appreciate, Marilyn, you mentioning that it's good for us to speak for ourselves because, what came out of the policy committee with 3 policy committee members here was that we were not, some of us were not in agreement with the policy as written at all and did not touch it at all, at that time because we recognized that there was more that needed to occur, which is why we came back to say, let's have a work group. So again, we're talking 2 different things right now. We have a motion on the table to when we're gonna put this back on the agenda, however that is determined. But then also, I do still think that we should have a work group. And if some of us don't wanna be a part of it, that's okay. But person who's on the policy committee, myself, I'm going to be a part of it because I'm on the policy committee. But we also wanted to give opportunity for other board members, if they wanted to also be on that committee. So 2 different things. We have a motion that's not addressing the work group. It's just addressing when, but then also I do still want to see a work group created and whether or not that looks like you coming back in July with dates, that's fine with me also.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I want to qualify what I said earlier, that we have expressed as a board support for this work, I think is true. Individuals may disagree, but as a board, we have passed budgets that have funded this work. As a board, we have voted on contracts that have funded this work. Some of us may disagree. That's okay, but as a board, we have supported diversity and equity and inclusion work, inclusive of staff time through our budgeting process. In terms of the specifics of the policy, I am not implying that all of us support this policy or my original draft or the new draft. I think that's what we are looking to figure out how to have discussion on that, and that is why I'm proposing to refer that to the administration to take a look at the policy, confer with our DEI director, and then bring something back to the board in terms of next steps. Kind of the work that we had tabled from our May meeting to allow some more time for that to, for the superintendent to have those discussions and to bring back to this board a path forward.
I'm just concerned with the timeline of August. Just that a good draft would be done by then. I don't know if we should discuss it rather than action. I know you have your
I have
motion
that
on the
same
table, though.
concern when you look at where we're at right now. We're more than halfway through July, or through June. And then we have 1 month of July that is usually so disruptive with 4th of July and a lot of other things that happen that time. I would like to see, rather than bringing it to action, but bringing a portion or bringing options or suggesting changes, or let's make sure we include this or that. And then we'll know when we're ready to go for action without having to keep postponing it.
Madam Chair, the motion that Trustee Hamilton referenced earlier was to come to the June meeting with a plan on how we might proceed. Kelly Crum and Superintendent will bring a strategy for continuing discussion. That motion carried 5-2. Voted against it.
It wasn't mine, but you know, that's
Yeah.
what y'all voted on.
To come to this meeting, the June meeting, with a plan on how we might proceed. Kelly Crum and Superintendent will bring a strategy for continuing discussion. That is what we put on for discussion tonight. My motion simply takes the intent of that and postpones it to the August meeting. I do not anticipate that Jeff
Very
will have
doable?
a policy complete.
No.
I do not anticipate that you'll have canvassed all of the board members and have a whole policy. I think my motion is simply to the discussion or recommendation for how we move forward on this comes back in August and gives you 2 months to talk to other trustees, talk to staff, figure out a path forward.
That
bring it
makes the
back.
most sense. I'm so concerned when we try to rush something that it will not do the job, that we'll miss things or be called on things that, well, do you know how that sounds to the average person? You know, you just don't want to get into something that wasn't so well thought out and so well shared with those who are going to be responsible for implementing it. Okay, so now we're voting on moving our whole timeline discussion, continued DEI to the August 20th meeting. Yeah? Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
So I would be opposed to that because I feel like we should just create a work group because it's going to take some time. So I'm opposing it because I feel like the bottom line is we all know it's going to take time. Furthering the discussion till August is pointless when we can just create the work group that will then do the work that it's going to take, and it's going to already take time. You know, nobody's rushing it, but we just need to create a work group. So no to this one because of that.
Yes.
No.
Okay, the motion passed. 5-1. Now we're on to action items. I would like us all to take a look at the clock just for a minute here. All right. Marcus, will you talk to us about cafeteria tables?
Sure, I'd love to. So a couple of months ago, the district conducted an RFP to replace cafeteria tables at Northeast, Hunt, Dibble, and Sharp Park. We received responses from 8 different vendors. During the bond, as you know, we did with Cascades, Jenner Lewis, and also Montessori. We have new cafeteria tables, so we're looking at replacing the ones at the rest of the elementary buildings to have a consistent table across the district. The vendor that provided the tables at the other buildings came in as the low bidder for this time around. The table has a 13-year warranty for all mechanical and structural components. This information we discussed at the Finance Committee meeting a few weeks ago, and the committee recommends moving forward with this BioFit model from NBS for $197,689.64, which will be paid out of the food service fund. That amount is budgeted in next year's food service budget. So at this time, we would recommend the board approve the bid from NBS.
Thank you. Any discussion? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Support.
Support. Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Now we're up to TMP pre-bond fee. Marcus.
So TMP is going to assist us with our pre-bond planning campaigning for the next potential bond issue, potentially for next year. I know we brought this to the board, I believe, last month, and there was questions about one of the line items in their proposal due to campaigning, which we went back to TMP, and they have since removed from their proposal, as you will see in the updated one you have before you. So at this time, we would recommend, again, approval of a contract with TMP in the amount of $83,825 to be invoiced after a successful bond vote.
So moved.
Second.
Support.
Discussion on TMP.
And TMP is they're not the people who are going to be doing they're the first group, like the
For
pre-group.
the architects and engineers, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now, we have one board member who's not voting at all. Is that all right? No, I don't mean that.
This is
No,
TMP.
I'm not even talking about that. I know you did.
So now we're on to construction.
Construction manager recommendation. Marcus.
All right, so as we've been talking over the last few months, we've again put out an RFP for construction manager services for a potential future bond issue. We went through a board interview process last month on May 28th, and the board asked us to reach out to references for all three firms, Christman, Granger, and Triangle. We received positive feedback for all three companies, which we discussed with the Finance and Facility Committee on June 6th. The committee at that time agreed that Triangle was best suited or is best suited to operate as our construction manager for the upcoming bond. For the two main reasons is their specialization in K-12 construction. The majority of their business is focused on K-12 education, so they know all the ins and outs of that. And along with that, they also provided the lowest per fee percentage profit margin of the three companies. We were happy with all three of them. Again, these two factors is what stood out to the committee. So at this time, we would recommend the board approving Triangle as our construction manager for the upcoming bond.
Madam Chair. I
Yes.
appreciate the work that the Facilities Committee, Finance and Facilities Committee has done. I wasn't able to attend the presentations, but I reviewed all of the bids myself. And I would make a recommendation that the board approves Chrisman as the construction manager for the following reasons. And I think there's, as Marcus said, all have their own merits. Chrisman is well known nationally and experienced in Michigan. Of all the bidders, I think they had the best response on the local and diverse contractor participation. Also note that they work well with the local contractors that I've had conversations with for subbing out that work. Some of the trades I've spoken to, Chrisman, I'll note from the from their bid was the original constructors of Jackson High School that were sitting in here. And they've also done some work for us before on some of our previous bond work. So I'm comfortable working with someone who's worked in this community before and has worked with some of our local contractors here. So I would make that motion.
Can you clarify which one?
Chrisman.
Because Triangle is on here, but you're saying you want to do Chrisman instead?
Yeah, there were
Not
three.
Triangle?
There were three bids: Chrisman, Triangle, and Granger.
And you're changing it from what they recommended to Christmas, but your motion is different then?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a second? Second. Roll call. Discussion?
Yes, so there is some discussion. Triangle was the one that I would recommend myself, and I see that was the one that was being recommended here as well. So I wouldn't be voting in favor of Chrisman, but just to mention, I did get to go to that meeting last month where we were able to hear all three of these individuals. Mr. Eduardo, was he the gentleman for TMP? Okay, so Mr. Eduardo, one of the things that I think was really helpful also in determining for me that I would prefer Triangle. Not only are they, did they come in with the lowest bid, which I think is, we'd be good stewards of our money. We know this board likes to be good stewards of their money, so we would be doing that if we chose Triangle, to be clear. But also, I was quite impressed with the simplicity of their presentation. And so I don't say simplicity as if there was something wrong with it, because it wasn't. It was everything I needed to know. And I was impressed with that because they gave us everything we needed to know. Mr. Eduardo, he mentioned that he's worked with Chrisman, Granger, and Triangle. And he said that his recommendation would be either of them. So that was very helpful to me as well. And then the way that they discussed the work that they do and how they do it, how inclusive they are, how intentional they are around ensuring that every person in the community is heard, how recognizing that we are the experts in our community. And these other groups didn't give me that same impression that they would be honoring of the community, even if they had worked on the building before. But Triangle definitely let me know that they would be hearing us, they would be respecting us, they wanted to hear from everybody. And they recognize that we're, again, experts in our community. So like I said, I would not vote for Chrisman. I would vote for Triangle. Chrisman, I would love to know as well, as a question for us, the difference in price between Chrisman and Triangle before we make before they vote. But yeah, Triangle would be my vote. Because again, like I said, they were very equitable as well in the way they did their presentation and what they were bringing to our community.
As far as, if you want to know about the difference in the percentage fees, Triangle's percentage fee is 1.6%. Granger came in at 1.95. Chrisman gave us a range anywhere between 1.95 and 2.2%, and that's not uncommon, especially given that we don't have defined scope. So it's going to be hard to define that sometimes. And then the other thing that I think TMP, and we had learned from reference checks and stuff too, is Triangle's estimating group is really, we're being told, very top-notch, and they do a very good job on the front end. And as we know, as we don't have developed scope yet, and some of the projects that we would like to do, given the age of some of our buildings, we don't know what we're getting into, and it's very helpful to have a firm that's very knowledgeable with their estimating capabilities to help us stay on bond budget.
So
I'll just add that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Triangle is at 1.6%, and you can explain what those numbers mean a little better when you get a chance, but just before you do. And then Chrisman is at 1.9 to 2 points. And they're the highest, it sounds like. Their range starts at 1.9, goes up to 2.2, and Triangle's at 1.6. And that's related to our money. Is that correct or no?
So the range is correct, and yes, they were the highest of the three as far as their range goes. To put it in another term, I guess, so that's their profit percentage, or whatever, for doing their work. So if the bond, let's just say it's a $100 million bond issue, so Triangle's percentage would be 1.6% of the construction cost, or whatever that calculation is. The difference between Triangle and Granger, we'll just use because that's a hard number, that 1.95% is a difference of 0.35%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but on $100 million is $350,000. which
Wow.
that could be another project, right? So percentage-wise, sure, they're all pretty close, but when you do some of that math, you can see the real dollars that are at play.
So we'd be end up paying a lot more money to Chrisman, should we choose them, to do the work versus,
You would be paying more for the other two for sure because their percentages are higher. I just wanted to put it in terms of dollars so
That
you
makes
can
sense.
kind of visualize it a little
That's
differently.
just on
That's
the
helpful.
construction fees.
Correct. That's their
Other costs, yeah.
profit percentage. Yep.
that comes out of our accounts or no?
It's paid through the bond. So it'd be less money available for.
Less money available to us to
Bond
use for our
projects or
bond
whatever.
projects. Okay, and that's
Okay,
helpful.
Marilyn?
So I'm on the finance committee, and I also sat through the meeting for the construction managers. And the architect did work with all three companies, and he liked all of them the same. So just to be fiscally responsible, I think that the lowest bid is better. And then they specialize in K through 12. And that when Marcus, when you said that the estimator was really good, that sold me. So.
Okay, at this point, let's do the roll call. Now, what I'm understanding, pardon me?
There's a motion and a second for Chrisman, so I've asked for a roll call.
Yes, roll call, please. Now, we're voting right now on just Chrisman, and I'm not sure that's our most efficient way of doing this.
So before the vote, Madam Chair, if you will, I
Yeah.
had the opportunity as well to be a part of the interviews. And at that time, I was in support of both Triangle and Chrisman. All of them were impressive, but in that order, I thought Triangle and Chrisman presented well.
Other discussion? Do you think it'd be more appropriate for us to do a roll call and just say which one that we would like to have, or we're gonna do a motion
We've got a
for
motion
each
and a
one?
second for
Are we
Chrisman,
doing
so
a
probably
motion
should
for
do
each one?
that.
Okay, let's start with Chrisman. All in favor?
No,
of-
so I will do a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're doing a roll call. I knew that.
Ms. Hamilton,
No.
Mr. Dobies, Mrs. Mitchell,
I'm going to abstain due to a conflict of interest.
Ms. Acton,
No.
Ms. Hunt,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fitzgerald.
You did for Chrisman? We have for Chrisman?
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Yes, no.
So it failed.
Okay, motion failed. Do I have a motion for any of the others?
I'll make a motion for Triangle.
Second.
Second? Okay, roll call, we have motion second. Do you have any discussion on Triangle? No? Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Dobies, Ms. Mitchell,
Abstain.
Ms. Acton,
Yes.
Ms. Hunt,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Yes,
Motion passes.
Pass.
motion passes.
And I'd like to, if I could, just take a minute before we move on, and introduce Brianne Pitchford from Triangle. She's the Vice President of Project Development. Thank you very much for spending some quality time with us this evening. Welcome to
Appreciate it.
Jackson. We look forward to telling some
Oh.
great things. You got to wave to us so that the board can.
Oh, over there, okay.
So again, while all the companies gave wonderful presentations, I will share with you, we did our own background checks, both on those companies that, those schools that you identified and potentially some that you didn't identify. And we talked with both their finance and their building and grounds, their facilities folks, and found we're very excited about the potential to work with Triangle. I think we're going to be great partners.
And I appreciate you showing up. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, now we have 23-24-132, final budget amendment. Marcus.
All right, so we are presenting our final budget amendment for review, discussion, and approval. Again, the state of Michigan still has to the end of their fiscal year in September to adjust anything they would like to do, but just a couple of, or highlight here. As you can see right now, as of today, we are projecting to add another $1.1 million to fund balance, subject to year-end bills and audit that's still coming up. But at this point, we look like we're adding about another $1 million to fund balance, which will get us to that above $18 million we talked about earlier this evening. And then we will start the process again next year. So again, we'll recommend approval of the final budget amendment.
I have a motion for approval of the final budget amendment.
So moved.
Second,
Support.
discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. 23-24-133, the 24-25 budget. Adoption. Marcus.
All right, I know we had a presentation earlier this evening. So again, every year we're required by law to adopt a budget prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. You've seen my presentation earlier. This one just sums up the millage numbers, figures, and dollar amounts we expect to collect for next year, along with resolutions for each fund to appropriate the amounts you see in revenue and expenditures. So at this time, we would ask the board to adopt the proposed millage rate as well as the 24-25 budget resolutions for the general fund, food service fund, student activity, debt service, and capital projects fund.
As presented?
As presented, thank
You
you.
didn't finish the sentence there. So moved.
Support.
Discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Now Jeff, who is not here, has the next one. So let's go. Yeah, that's the one, Jeff's going to present that. Iowa. I'll wait till.
I'll move approval of the policy revisions as presented. We discussed it previously. It's coming from Neola or whatever, however you say it.
Support?
Support.
Discussion?
Yes, I didn't have these in my packet. Can we just remind us really quickly what they are? What's the, just real briefly, what's the titles of them? The, what we're passing?
This is the
It's more than one, right?
Oh, here's Jeff
Yep.
right here. That's okay.
Expected Marcus to take longer.
I know, he was so snappy.
Yep.
That's okay. I've got it. Hold still.
And I did not put copies in the packet because they were duplicates.
Yeah, that's all right. I got you.
But can we just remind us which
Yeah,
ones?
I'm
We don't have to go into
gonna give
too
it
much
to y'all.
detail either.
I got them all. These were all law
1240,
changes.
2410.
So the first one's going to have to do with the superintendent evaluation. It provides for an appeal process that's consistent with law. The next one is a revocation. So 2410 was a policy that prohibited the referral for assistance with pregnancy. So that was law that you could no longer do it. So now that that law went away, the policy goes away with it. So policy 2410 is a removal of that policy. You have some additional policies around reproductive health and family planning. These are all, again, just tied straight to the changes in law. 2414 provided some language updates specifically tied to law. This wasn't anything we had a whole lot of conversation around in that there weren't a lot of choices for us. These were more driven by this is what the current law says, so policies changed to adapt that. Same thing for 2418, which was sex education. There was a conversation, policy 8800, around religious and patriotic ceremonies and observances, and this had to do with a case law surrounding prayer that was led by a coach down in, I'm going to get the state wrong, was it Washington or Virginia? I forget which, but and so basically we don't mandate prayer, but we won't expressly prohibit prayer if our staff, and we do prayer around the pole now, so some of these pieces are just, again, kind of updating with law, and that was a case law that kind of drove that policy. There was a policy around purchasing, 6320, the money, because there's almost always a policy around money, and that's because the federal government changed the way that the requirements for how you expense federal dollars. So we update our policies to match. And then there's some construction and renovation policies, and that speaks to the state changing law, which talks about, oh, crying out loud, my brain just fried on me here, prevailing wage. And so again, what our requirements are for when we bid out jobs that will be construction. And another procurement one for federal grants, 6325, another one for prevailing wage, 6350. So they're all law-driven, and they're really kind of fall into primarily two buckets. One is how we spend money, either state or federal money, and then how we comply with changes in the section ed law portion of it.
Thank you. It was
Okay.
helpful to,
Gotcha.
be reminded that.
It's been a minute since we talked.
Right, to be reminded that all of these were basically things that we didn't have a whole lot of say over, so that the community would know that that's what we're voting on.
So moved.
Second? Support.
Aye.
Opposed?
Madam Chair, I move we enter closed session to discuss collective bargaining strategy.
Second?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We'll be going into closed session.
Can I just mention something before you guys go
How
about?
about as we go, yeah, because I know
Yeah.
you've got a couple pieces you want to get
Yeah,
out.
we just, so we will be leaving once you guys go in closed session and won't be here afterwards, but I think it's really important to let you know that you probably got a message yesterday describing what's going to happen with our technology department, and the most important thing that you need to know is that you will be losing, for a short period of time, Google, Gmail, printing, all those things. You will not have access to your JPS Gmail. So at the time we sent that message, the plan was to do that starting June 20th, which is Thursday. Let me get my dates right in my head, but yeah, Thursday at midnight. So now, actually Friday morning at midnight. So now they've backed that up to 2 o'clock on Thursday. So another message will be coming back out. I just wanted to make sure that I let you guys know that ahead of time, because you will lose access to your JPS email. And in order to get it back on the 24th, you'll have to come on campus to any of the buildings or come in and see us in Reynolds Hall and sign in. But I just want to make sure that you guys knew that, so that if you ran into any teachers or staff who said, I didn't hear about it, that you were well aware of what was happening, so that there will be a downtime. And the plan is for it to be back up June 24th. Please be patient with us while that happens, because anything can happen, right? So just, and I'm always a phone call away, but I just want to make sure you guys were well aware of that.
So again, just to kind of highlight where Chris is at, none of us here and no district employee and no board will have access to their email starting at 2 p.m. on Thursday until, I'm going to ballpark it, noon on Monday. It may be up earlier, but we'll just ballpark it at noon on Monday. Again, we're flipping the switch between JCISD and All Covered, and Google's got to do a whole lot of stuff in the background to make this happen. So if you want to put up a notification on your email says, I can't read my email, so that a responder note, that'll probably help folks out. But to Chris's point, make sure everybody hears that, because none of us will have it either.
And no phones, right? So you won't be calling, like, we won't have access to our phones or your drive. So I think for everybody mostly too, that's really important to know, that if you're going to have some documents you want to work on or anything that you might have saved to your drive, you won't have access from Thursday to Monday. So download it and work it in a different system on a different computer, but you know.
But you just take the weekend off. Can we do
That's
that?
what I
Can you
said.
just tell
I just think we
everybody
should all
to
take the
enjoy weekend?
20th to the 24th off.
Thank you, and I think we're going to move into closed session for our purposes. We're going to go back into the esports room. I am going to be making a recommendation coming out to have a conversation and ratify an agreement with our Jackson Education Administrative Assistants. That's really the action that I will be recommending moving forward.
I move to return to open session.
Support.
Aye.
Opposed, the same.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to ratify the JEAA tentative agreement as presented.
Second?
Support.
Second.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Yay, yay, yay. Okay, our next action item, we're on to superintendent employment agreement update. Do you have a contract, copy of the contract? Okay. We're looking at changing just a little bit of language. There's not that big of a thing here. On page 3. What's the compensation payment crossed out?
For Madam Chair,
Oh, language change, okay.
for,
Yes, Derek.
I would move approval of the employment agreement with the following changes, that on page 3 under longevity benefits, that is corrected to 5 to 9 years, 10 to 15, 16 to 20, so that the years aren't overlapping.
It really just need to be 10.1.
Okay, fine, 10.1.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as it's not overlapping.
15.1.
That's the intent. Should be 10.1.
10.1, 15.1, and 20.1 years.
Are you gonna do each change as we go, or do you wanna just do a bunch of them at once, or? I see there's several changes. Do you wanna do one at a time, or do you wanna do a bunch at once, or
His motion was to approve it.
approve that one with those changes?
Yes, on 5, 7 is several.
There's several, yeah.
8, 9, yeah.
Page 3 at the top, just is cutting the language out. Tax deferred, the words compensation payment will be gone.
Payments gone, compensations in.
Okay. Payments,
I'm
that's
sorry.
crossed out too.
My motion was to adopt it as presented with all the proposed
Oh, with all the
changes.
correct, oh,
With the
okay.
with the proposed changes.
Okay, let's look
and
at them
with-
all and
with
make
an-
sure everybody's okay to do that, because I think that's a wonderful idea.
Support.
Okay, page 5. The sick bank, no more than 90. That's all the difference, put 90 in there. Page 7. Evaluation. The first sentence is deleted. And 12, on number 12?
That's,
That's added.
I believe it's
The
consistent
pink
with.
is? I mean, the highlighted? Okay, all right. All right. Mine's pink, so I was very confused. All right. Okay. The added part is the first sentence in evaluation.
That just brings it in line with the current law.
Right. And 12.1 is appeal. All this brings it in line with the current changes in the evaluation at the state level. Then page 8, except for the, obviously, part that's already highlighted, is fine. Page 9, at the top, the first paragraph, partial paragraph, from if the contract to was for just cause is new, additional. No monetary changes at all. Okay, discussion?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So Jeff, actually, I was hoping that you were just gonna come and kind of explain this.
I'm happy to.
Thank
Any of
you.
them you would like?
Now,
Yeah.
the whole contract is not being discussed here,
So
just any
I'm
changes.
aware, Pam. You know, I
All
can
right,
read.
let's make sure.
But I just kind of wanted to get an overview. A lot of times Jeff gives us an overview. If you can do that, that would be beneficial. Then I'll ask my questions if it's not covered in that.
All right, so there are, A couple of different changes in here. The first is the change regarding law. There's some changes with regards to practice versus what's actually in the contract. Again, we talked about it in previous bargaining units where we go from 30 days to 90 days. Difference in short-term disability to long-term disability. Just consistency in regard to that. There's no changes in compensation. There is a change in practice for what we do. So when Derek says, hey, check this out, it's 10 years to 11 years in the contract. Well, where's 10 to 11 fit? And so 10.1 is the correct number. It's just language to adopt what we do versus what was there. Biggest change that might beyond that is the conversation with regards to early termination of the contract. And it's language that's already there in 16C under arbitration, where the arbiter has the ability to, if the contract is terminated for any reason that does not meet the legal standard of just cause, then the arbiter can pay up to the full monetary value of the contract. The language up above, which talks about termination for cause, that's language that's been in there. That article's already been there. All I did was move or reiterate that language up above that simply says, hey, look, if the superintendent is terminated, and this is language that's being recommended around the state with regards to from MASA, not just JPS, but because we have seen the life expectancy of superintendents, which is 2.8 years, by the way, we've seen that dwindle. And so you see districts where in uncertain times, boards come in and I'm going to move to fire the superintendent. This happens. I've seen it happen more than I would like to say, and Tecumseh's a perfect example, and I don't speak ill of them, but I think at one time they were paying 5 different superintendents. So this simply makes certain that everybody on the board understands and I'll use myself because it's my contract. If you let me go, break my contract for a reason that doesn't meet that just cause standard. And I don't want to give you all of just cause. I'll give you just kind of a few basic examples and seek your attorney out for more. But the reality is just cause. Did I break a law? Did I go to jail? Did I steal from the district? Did I have sex with some sort of moral turpitude, right? Something along those lines, you can let me go, and this wouldn't apply. As long as you don't just make up a reason to let me go, as long as there's a discipline record. In other words, you followed a discipline pattern, you've evaluated me, or I've done something significant, you can't let me go for just no reason. You can't let me go for a reason that is arbitrary or capricious. It's got to be something that meets a higher legal standard. And as long as you don't do that, none of this applies, right? I mean, if I leave, if I retire, none of this applies, right? It's only if I get removed for a reason that doesn't rise to that level. So as far as the district is concerned, this is protection for Jeff. And at the same time, it's very clear to anybody, I'll speak to it. There are 3 open seats on the board in a couple of months. Who knows what the board looks like in January? If the board were to come in January and say, Jeff, we're going to let you go and move in a different direction, there's a monetary cost to doing that, and they should know what that looks like. So that's my rationale.
Any more on that? And is that your full?
Yeah,
presentation?
that basically covers everything in here.
Madam
There's
Chair.
nothing in there that's anything other than that.
Okay,
I get no extra money. There's no increase in pay. There's no more days off or anything like that. It is 100% the exact same contract that says, don't fire me for a reason that's not just cause, or you're going to have to pay me. And then I get an appeal process with my evaluation, which is law. That's the sum total of what the changes are.
You said the appeal was law?
Yeah.
So
And,
thank you.
that's actually part of the board policy that we adopted, an hour ago, and I think we referenced the law in the policy or in the
Okay.
contract.
Just a couple questions, and thank you for that overview, because that's always helpful for me if you just give an overview, so thank you for that. The just cause stuff, you said, is there a list somewhere? Like, how do we know, how does the board know what,
There's seven basic
Yeah.
presumptions
Where-
around just
Where's
cause.
that spelled out at, or is that something you get us a copy of?
I mean, you
How do we
can
know?
Google it. It's a term.
So Jeff, are you able to get us a copy of that or no?
It's a legal standard. I can get, I'll Google and send you what I find on Google, but I would not, as a board, it would not be my recommendation to rely on any list that I provide. I give you some examples, but the reality is before you terminate the superintendent, no matter if it's me or the next superintendent or the superintendent down the road, go to your lawyer and say, does this meet the level of just cause? That would be the first place I would go.
It seems like that with these agreements and these superintendents, that there has to be some type of at least universal list that most school boards can kind of rely on.
Well, and it's
No?
not just, that's not just us here. Again, it's not just superintendents. Just cause is a legal standard. It's not,
Okay.
we're applying it here, right? So it's a level, the best way to think about it is a threshold of
It's not a clear process, which is why it's argued in the courts as
yeah,
to.
you got to think of.
I pulled it up here. You have
Just
to get.
causes a-
Versus category, do we have, category is kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah, just cause is a legal threshold you need to meet, right? Think about it in other terms you could think about it in, do I have reasonable or probable cause? If I wanted to, so.
Jeff,
so
let me just read these seven real quick, and it may
Yeah.
simplify it. And
So don't read it for me. I mean, read it if you
Okay.
want to, but I still want a copy. And then before you read it, I want to finish my questions, and then Derek can talk. The next question I have for you, you said that there's no change in the amounts. I didn't see the extra duty pay on here. And now help me, that's what I'm trying to say, or trying to understand.
The
I know
extra-
we do a contract, just a minute. I know we do a contract in November, December, and I know that that's changing because of superintendent evaluations are kind of changing. The timing, I think, is something like that with the state. Okay, well, either way, when we do it in November, December, we have the extra duty pay on the contract. I don't see it in here. What's the difference? What's going on?
All right, so extra duty pay is a separate contract that pays me for overseeing the HR department. And that right there was voted on and it's been discussed.
So
ad
that's not my
nauseam over
question.
time.
It's just not in here. It's normally on your contract. I'm just wondering why
It's not part of this contract. It's an extra duty contract. It's a completely separate contract and it runs concurrent with this one.
So you do know what I mean as far as like, it's not in this paperwork, because usually when we get this paperwork, I see it in the paperwork. It's not in here. I'm just trying to understand, just so I can understand what's going on with it.
The language
Nothing's
changes that I'm recommending don't apply, if you will, to the extra duty piece.
And will we come back and vote on that later
No.
or something?
No, that one right there is not up for vote. It's, there's no changes to it.
Okay.
It simply runs, so all it does is it articulates what extra duty I do and how much money I get paid and what the responsibilities I have to the district.
And it's not in this one because it's a separate contract.
Correct.
And there's no changes in the language of it.
Correct. The changes in the language for appeal and for all of those things, that's this one right here.
Okay, but it's still implied in this one as well? No, or?
Only in such that, again, if I were to be removed from my position, that extra duty contract would be portion of, that's already covered in 16.9, and now the language is reiterated in 15. So, but that's it. No, that's the only thing that combines, so.
Okay, so it's implied, but not in here written. Okay, thank you. That helps.
No, I got you on that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second.
I just was curious about, why was this changed from 30 to like, can you just explain sick bank to me?
Yeah, so for a while back when I arrived in the district in 2014, we were using 30 days as a sick bank because what would happen is a teacher would have, or an employee, an administrator would accumulate 30 days. And then if they had to go out on disability, the 30 days would get them to short-term disability. We don't provide short-term disability. We provide long-term disability, so it's changed, right?
Okay.
So now we accumulate up to 90 for that exact same reason. I don't accumulate more than 90, I accumulate up to 90 because in the still days I gotta accumulate, right? Like I still only get paid, I don't get 90 every year, I get to accumulate up to 90. And that way, if I needed to go out on disability, if I had an injury or an illness that took me out, I would burn through, per law, I would burn through my sick days first, and then long-term disability would kick in at that point. That's why. That's the 30 to 90, and it's language meeting practice.
Thank you.
Just curious, does that save us money over the long term instead of buying short term?
Yeah, and because short-term was impossible, what it was is short-term really hindered our employees. It's funny, there's just more restrictions on what they could do. We offer, instead of going through short-term disability, which through MESA was cumbersome, if somebody needs short-term coverage, they typically get it through a third-party vendor like AFLAC or something like that, which we provide access to, but that becomes an employee-specific. And I could tell you that out of 1,000 employees, it's like less than 25 that have short-term through AFLAC. And we ran into one person who had it this year with MESA, and I think when they sat down and said, how do you apply for it or how do you look at it, they couldn't even use it. The challenges are simply steeper with what MESA provided for short-term disability. It just outdated itself that way. So that's why we go to 90 days. And that's, by the way, is the same number you see in the teacher contract and the administrative contract. It's not, I still have to earn the days. I still have to use them. And the number of days I take that are sick any given year are few and far between.
Can people share their bank with each other? No.
No, we don't have a sick bank that people donate to. That got complicated a number of years ago.
Sure. Okay. Just curious.
One more question
Okay,
on
now
page,
let's-
one more question on page 3.
Yep.
Under your tax deferred compensation,
Yeah.
we have the part that's drawn out.
Yep.
If any portion of can you just kind of explain that?
Yeah, because my tax deferred annuity comes in the first paycheck of, first paycheck of July. Once that money's deposited into that account, in order to repay that, there's no way to repay that. So you can't actually collect that because if I have to go take that money back out of the account, I incur a penalty, a federal penalty, a 10% penalty, just even to take that out, let alone the taxes that then come with it. That's just not really a feasible piece. So that's why.
And this is saying if you're terminated for any reason, even if it's meets the level of, what's the terms you just used?
Just cause.
Just cause?
Yeah.
So if just cause you're terminated, help me understand how that relates to that.
Just cause is the only reason that wouldn't apply.
That it would not apply? Help me.
If I'm terminated for cause, and then candidly, I get nothing.
Okay, and then you get that penalty or whatever. Okay, because I'm just saying that for any reason, I was wondering why we cross it out. Just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Oh, yeah, the language in the middle. But no, if I get terminated for cause, I get no money on this deal, and I would have to pay back unearned. And we didn't have the termination piece. I'll give you an example. So our administrators have the exact same conversation, right? And their contract used to start July 1, and they wouldn't actually work until August. And so what would happen is we corrected this a number of years ago. We had people who would leave. We had a principal, great guy, went down to Tennessee, right? Well, they've used vacation time. They've taken this money and they never worked a day for it, right? Because they don't actually start their work until August. Well, I work every day of the year, so it doesn't quite look the same, but you can't go back and get that. I mean, again, okay, you got to go dip into your retirement account, take the 10% penalty, that's not the right, yeah. And we're talking about relatively small amounts of money at that point. So. But no, if I get terminated for cause, there's no money in there. Yep. Did I answer all of everybody's questions on regard to this? Make sure. Sorry to go through all this stuff, folks.
Derek, do you have a comment? Your light's on.
Oh.
I think we had a motion and a second and
Yep.
discussion.
All in favor of accepting the contract?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No?
All right, motion passes.
No.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, let's see. Oh, board comments. Board comments. Yes.
So to the community, have a great summer. You all have done amazing work all year long. You know, so have a great summer, enjoy it. We look forward to seeing you come back in August or September, whenever we're coming back. But yeah, have a great summer.
Thank you. Derek?
Appreciate all the work that went into the hefty agenda tonight for the TMP stuff getting corrected and coming back to us. And look forward to seeing everyone here in July.
Big thanks to Chris. I know she's not here right now, but I heard from many staff members across different buildings about how great the picnic was. I was able to pop in, but just for a short time, and everyone loved it. It was great, and they love the food and the prizes and just coming together.
So I just wanted to thank all of the staff at JPS for all of your hard work and dedication to teaching our children, and have a great summer.
No comment, thank you. Oh. Waiting for this comment. My comment is simply I was thrilled that we had pretty good turnout tonight for as hot as it was. And I'm really sad that it's this late at night. There were a lot of things on the agenda this month. And thank you for hanging in there.
July is or June is a hard month. What do you mean, remind them? Give me the.
We have just one July 23rd thing to keep track of. It's the MASB workshop, superintendent evaluation. It's in the Media Center at 6 o'clock. And after that is the regular board meeting.
Move to adjourn.